Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Diane Holik. Diane Holik, a 43-year-old senior executive at IBM, was known for her reliability. So when she missed a scheduled work call on the morning of November 16, 2001, her colleagues were immediately concerned. Unable to reach her, they alerted the police, asking them to check on her at home. The officers' discovery at her house was gruesome. Born in 1958 in New York City, Diane was a driven person who had built a successful career at IBM, one of the world's largest hardware and software companies. Over 20 years, her hard work had earned her a senior position, allowing her to work from her home office in Austin, Texas, where she had moved in 1996. Diane lived a luxurious life in the suburbs, hosting wine-tasting parties, frequenting expensive restaurants and dance clubs, and engaging in charity work. She was also trying to improve her personal life. In mid-November 2001, a severe storm warning was in effect in Texas, bringing torrential rains and tornadoes to Austin. On the morning of November 16th, Diane worked from home, but her company had scheduled a work call. Despite having multiple phones, including her home phone, she stopped answering all of them. Her colleagues left messages asking her to call back, and they soon became concerned when she didn't respond. They contacted the police department and requested that someone be sent to Diane's house to check on her welfare. When the officers arrived, Diane's neighbor, who had a spare key, noticed their presence. The police entered the house, where they were met with complete silence, broken only by the sound of dogs emerging from the kitchen. As they received no response from Diane, they began to search the house. In the second-floor bedroom, they made the grim discovery of Diane Holik's lifeless body. Diane's home was one of the cleanest crime scenes detectives had ever encountered. Her body, fully dressed, lay in the bedroom next to her bed. Strangulation marks on her neck, resembling those left by a rope, and signs of wrist binding with cable ties indicated a crime had taken place. The lack of theft, struggle, or forced entry led detectives to suspect that Diane's killer was someone she knew and trusted. There was no evidence of forced intimacy before her death, but dark spots and red stains on the carpet near the bedroom entrance suggested a possible struggle. One anomaly in the otherwise tidy home caught the detectives' attention. A towel lying on the back of the living room sofa seemed out of place. They sent it to the laboratory for analysis, hoping it might provide a crucial clue. The police spoke to the people who knew Diane and found that she didn't have any known enemies, although it's possible that some might have been unknown. During their investigation, they discovered that Diane was in a romantic relationship with Dennis Conley, the man she wanted to spend the rest of her life with. This wasn't her first marriage. Her previous one had ended quickly. Diane and Dennis met through a dating service, and he had 2 children from a previous marriage. Dennis was a businessman living in Houston, around 150 miles from Austin, where Diane resided. Despite the distance and infrequent meetings, they grew close quickly, and after 2 months of communicating, Dennis proposed to Diane, giving her a $17,500 platinum ring. She accepted his proposal. According to Diane's close friends, her relationship with Dennis had begun to deteriorate recently. As an independent woman focused on building her career, Diane felt uneasy with Dennis's occasional attempts to control her. Another issue was the decision to move to Houston. The couple had decided to start their life together in his hometown, so Diane put her suburban Austin home up for sale. However, realtors struggled to find a buyer willing to pay the $435,000 asking price for the property. Detectives investigated whether Dennis was involved in Diane's death, asking him to come to the police station for a voluntary conversation without an attorney. Dennis agreed and spoke candidly with the detectives. The medical examiner's report indicated that Diane died between 3 p.m. on November 15th and 3 a.m. on November 16th. A strange detail caught their attention. Diane's wedding ring, given to her by Dennis, was missing from her finger. while her other jewelry in the bedroom remained untouched. This led to the theory that the killer had a personal motive or deliberately removed the ring to mislead the investigation. Dennis presented himself as a grieving person. The detectives asked him about his relationship with Diane and his whereabouts on the day of her death and the day her body was found. According to Dennis, he was in Houston at the time, claiming he last spoke with Diane on the morning of November 15th. He spent the entire day at work without contacting her again the following morning. When he couldn't reach her, he left a voicemail, unaware of her death. Dennis acknowledged that their relationship was troubled, revealing recent arguments before concluding the conversation. The police collected his fingerprints and a DNA sample, but it was possible he could have traveled to Austin, interacted with Diane, and returned to Houston by the next morning. However, after verifying his alibi, the detectives determined he had not left the city, so they had to pursue another suspect. Before leaving the police station, Dennis provided a crucial lead that changed the direction of the investigation, pointing out that Rye, one of Diane's co-workers, had shown an unusual interest in her. The detectives looked into this and found that Rye frequently visited Diane's home and sometimes walked her dogs, but he had a solid alibi, ruling him out as a suspect. When speaking with Diane's colleagues, the authorities discovered that a mysterious individual had inspected her house a few days before her death. He claimed he would make a cash offer if he liked the property, and planned to return with his wife in a few days to make a joint decision on the purchase. As this was one of the few leads the police had, they concentrated all their efforts on finding this unknown buyer, hoping someone might have seen him when he visited Diane's house. The detectives decided to investigate the owners of properties for sale in the area where Diane lived, suspecting that the mysterious buyer might have viewed more than just the victim's house. They conducted interviews with the owners and discovered that 7 women had experienced a similar incident. A 35 to 45-year-old man with a prominent nose and dark hair styled back had visited their homes on the day of Diane's death, without a real estate agent present. While 6 women had refused him entry, 1 woman had allowed him inside. According to her, the man's behavior became strange after entering the house. He didn't show any interest in the rooms or doors, and only asked her to show him the second-floor bedroom. She sensed something was off and asked him to leave. Notably, he had introduced himself as Walter Miller when requesting permission to view the property. The police searched their databases for the name Walter Miller in Austin, but found 2 individuals with that name, neither of whom matched the age or physical description of the suspect. As detectives probed the motive behind the crime, they wondered why the thief had only taken the wedding ring, and whether they might have stolen other jewelry or cash, given the victim's wealth and history of living alone, which made it impossible to determine the extent of her jewelry collection. They also questioned the significance of the perpetrator removing the cable ties that bound Diane's hands and taking them with him. Did he know her personally? The autopsy revealed no signs of sexual assault prior to Diane's death, and her body was found fully clothed. Despite this, the detectives returned to her home to search for any traces of semen, assuming the perpetrator might have left behind some evidence. However, their search yielded nothing. A composite sketch of a potential suspect was broadcast on evening news programs, urging anyone with information about a similar individual to come forward. One of the few leads available to investigators was a few strands of hair found on a towel at Diane's residence. Although the hair lacked roots, preventing a complete DNA analysis, detectives remained hopeful that a partial DNA profile could still yield results. A woman contacted the police after seeing the composite sketch, which she believed resembled a suspect in the Diane Holik case. During her interview with detectives, she recounted how she and her husband had listed their house for sale 6 months prior. A man had arrived, claiming he wanted to purchase the property with cash, but needed to view it first. Since no real estate agent was present, she refused to let the stranger inside. 2 months later, the same man reappeared on her doorstep, introducing himself as Jim Taylor. With her husband away at work and only her young daughter present, the man again asked to enter the house. When she denied his request, he became agitated, shouting and insisting that he be allowed inside. The woman threatened to call the police, prompting the would-be buyer to leave. Still shaken, she wrote down the man's name and the license plate number of his minivan, which had been parked in her driveway. When she saw the suspect's portrait on the news, she immediately recognized him as the same person who had come to her house a while back. This new information led the police to obtain the license plate number, which they then used to identify the vehicle's owner through their database. However, the owner's name was not Jim Taylor, as they had initially suspected, but rather Patrick Anthony Russo. At first, it seemed unlikely that Russo was involved in Diane's death. He appeared to be a family man, living 40 minutes from Austin with his wife and 2 children, and even played in a local church music band. But as the police dug deeper into his past, they discovered a more sinister history. Russo was an ex-convict who had served time for a series of attacks on women. One of these attacks had even escalated to abduction, where he had tied his victim up with cable ties and attempted to strangle her, stopping only at the last moment. For this crime, he had been sentenced to 20 years in prison. While serving his sentence, Anthony Russo met his future wife Janet, a volunteer at the prison's church program. Despite his lengthy criminal record, Russo was granted parole after serving 8 years of his 20-year sentence. The police were skeptical about the coincidence, so they obtained a search warrant for Anthony Russo's residence. When the police arrived, Anthony answered the door, but they found no incriminating evidence inside his house, including Diane's ring or any other personal belongings. A subsequent search of his minivan also yielded nothing. However, the neighbors reported seeing a similar vehicle parked outside Diane's house on the day of her murder. Significantly, the police discovered several cable ties in the utility room that matched the ones that left marks on Diane's wrists. Although we might consider the tie as evidence, it's still indirect because anyone can purchase it at a hardware store. The investigator informed Anthony that his name had come up during an investigation and asked him to come to the station for a more in-depth conversation. At the station, the investigators asked Russo about his whereabouts on November 15th and 16th. Russo explained that on Thursday, the 15th, he traveled to Austin to visit a religious radio station but was unable to enter because no one answered the door. Coincidentally, this radio station is located near Diane Holik's house. According to Russo, he headed home around 4 p.m. but got slightly lost due to a hurricane, which delayed his arrival until around 6 p.m. When the police questioned Russo about his intentions to purchase a house, he claimed he had never browsed any properties for sale. This response proved to be pivotal, as it would later have significant repercussions. Upon being shown a photograph of Diane, Russo remained expressionless and denied ever having met her. Although the police were unable to find any evidence linking Russo to the crime, they were forced to release him. However, the following day, detectives visited the radio station Russo had mentioned and uncovered evidence that his previous statement about the closed doors was a fabrication. The employees at the station revealed that they had not closed the doors, as a large crowd had gathered in the lobby due to an approaching tornado. Meanwhile, a second woman approached the police after encountering a man who resembled the suspect's sketch while trying to sell her house. When the stranger came to her door with a pamphlet featuring local house listings, including her own, she let him in to view the property under the pretense that he would make a cash offer. However, when she showed him a bedroom, he attempted to attack her, but retreated hastily upon hearing her child cry in the adjacent room. The quick-thinking woman retained the pamphlet, which held a crucial fingerprint that the police later matched to Anthony Russo. Russo's claim of never having looked at houses for sale was thus discredited, and his false statement constituted a misdemeanor, a probation violation. Russo's arrest was prompted by his failure to meet parole conditions. Fearing he might flee while they gathered evidence linking him to Diane's death, authorities deemed it necessary to detain him. The police tracked down 15 women who had shown Russo around their homes. All of these women were later brought in to identify the suspect. In a lineup, the women saw 5 men, including Anthony Russo, all dressed similarly and with similar appearances. Each of these men repeated the phrase, "You have a beautiful house," in turn. 10 of the 15 women identified Anthony Russo as the man who had viewed their homes prior to purchasing. The other 5 women were unable to make a positive identification. When the police questioned Russo again, he knew he had been caught lying. Despite this, he continued to proclaim his innocence. At one point, he requested to see his wife and then refused to answer any more questions. The detectives soon received a report from the laboratory, which confirmed that the mitochondrial sequence of the hair found on the towel at Diane's house matched Anthony Russo's DNA. While this was a significant finding, it was not conclusive, as there was a small chance, 1 in 12,900,000, according to court documents, that the hair could have belonged to someone else. Although the investigation had accumulated a significant amount of circumstantial evidence, there was no single piece of direct evidence linking Russo to Diane Holik's death. One additional piece of circumstantial evidence, however, was the report on the location of his cell phone, which placed Russo in the same area where Diane lived on the day she died. After examining the computer seized from his house, experts found a disturbing search history. Russo, a 37-year-old father of 2 and regular churchgoer, frequently visited an adult website. On this site, he watched videos and read articles about strangulation during intimate interactions. Notably, access to these materials required payment. Even more alarming was the discovery that just days before Diane's death, Russo read a story about a man who posed as a buyer to enter a lonely woman's home, strangled her, and then stole valuables, making it seem like a robbery to conceal his true motive of satisfying a desire for strangulation. The detectives conducted a thorough investigation into Russo and his wife's financial situation. Despite having only $2,000 in savings, Russo claimed to be in the market for a new home, which raised suspicions. Furthermore, the couple had yet to pay off the mortgage on their current residence, although there was no concrete evidence to prove this. On February 5, 2004, more than 2 years after Diane Holik's death, the police arrested Anthony Russo on suspicion of her murder. During his trial, 14 women took the stand, testifying under oath that Russo had approached them about purchasing a house. Several of these women reported that Russo had visited them on the day of Diane's death, although they refused to let him into their homes. One woman, however, initially allowed him in before asking him to leave due to his unusual behavior. Notably, all the women Russo targeted were of a similar age, suggesting that he had been observing them before making his move. Russo appeared to have a specific type of woman in mind. The prosecution presented the evidence again, describing the events of that fateful November day. As previously stated, Diane informed a colleague that a potential buyer had visited to view the house. Prosecutors suggested that Russo learned Diane lived alone when he first saw the house on November 15th. He toured homes for sale, but only one woman, Diane, let him inside. On his return to Diane's house, Russo likely asked to view the property again, but this time with a sinister motive, carefully planning his actions to avoid leaving evidence. On the rainy day, Diane unexpectedly offered him a towel to dry his hands and face, which he carelessly discarded on the back of the sofa. As she showed him the house again, Russo attacked her on the second floor. Prosecutors believed Russo derived pleasure from strangling, ultimately causing Diane's death during their second encounter. Before leaving, Russo stole cable ties and Diane's wedding ring, which the police were unable to find. He locked the door using a spare key kept at the front door. Russo's former and current wives testified in court, and both claimed that Anthony Russo took pleasure in the act of strangulation. It's notable that this was not his first offense, as he had a prior conviction for a similar crime. After deliberating for 11 hours, the jury found Patrick Anthony Russo guilty, and the court sentenced him to life in prison. Despite his history of criminal behavior, Russo never admitted to his guilt. He will become eligible for parole again and can file his first parole petition in 2044, at which point he will be over 80 years old. Welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Heather Jackson. Heather Jackson, a 23-year-old mother of two, had just found a house on a quiet street near Lake Erie. She was thrilled to have a new place to call home, especially after separating from her husband Wayne and going through a divorce. Despite the challenges they faced as parents, Heather and Wayne were once a happy couple, but their marriage didn't survive the struggles. After the breakup, Heather faced tough times, but she didn't give up. She focused on making her children, 3-year-old Selena and 1-year-old Wayne Jr., happy. On September 8, 2012, Heather's friend Danielle arrived at her house at 2:30 p.m. as they had planned. However, when Danielle knocked on the door, no one answered. She checked all the doors, but they were locked. This was unusual, as Heather would normally let her know if she had to change plans. Danielle's concern grew as she realized Heather and her children were not at home. Danielle tried to reach Heather by calling her mother, Jody, but was unable to get in touch with her that day. Failing that, Danielle contacted all of Heather's friends, but none of them knew her whereabouts. Then Danielle spotted Selena's pacifier on the porch, which made her increasingly anxious. She knew Heather would never leave the house without it. As the hours ticked by with no call from Heather, Jody grew more and more uneasy, her intuition screaming warning signals. She decided to take action and phoned the police, asking them to perform a welfare check. When the officers arrived at the address, they knocked on the door, but received no response. Next, they made their way around the house, peering through the windows, but saw nothing out of the ordinary. With no signs of forced entry or any indication of foul play, they departed. At approximately 7:30 p.m., Thomas Hansen and Dan Reiner, friends of Heather, arrived at her house, having learned that she was missing. They knocked on the front door, but there was no response. Reiner then proceeded to the back porch, forced open the door, and entered the home. Upon entering, they discovered Heather's lifeless body in the bedroom, completely naked, and immediately called the emergency services. Sergeant Eric Gray Bill, a police officer with the Sandusky Force, responded to the call and entered Heather Jackson's home. He found Heather's body awkwardly positioned between the box spring and mattress in her bedroom, with a ligature constricting her neck. Notably, the TV in the house was still operational, but the children were absent. Their room was empty. While inspecting the house, the officers came across a door to a utility closet that they hadn't checked yet. Upon opening it, Sergeant Eric Gray Bill was met with a horrific sight. Stacked boxes, and behind them, the lifeless bodies of Heather's children. The police immediately sealed off the area, treating it as a crime scene. The local officers were left stunned, having never encountered anything so heinous in their careers. The brutal murder of innocent children left them struggling to comprehend how someone could commit such an atrocity. The forensic examination results only added to the devastation felt by Heather's family and friends. According to court documents, Dr. Diana Scala Barnett, the deputy coroner for Lucas County, performed autopsies on the 3 victims. She determined that Heather Jackson's cause of death was ligature strangulation and observed that Heather's rectum was found to be more open than usual after death. Dr. Scala Barnett attributed this to the likely introduction of an object into the rectum around the time of death, which kept it in that state. Dr. Scala Barnett also testified that Wayne Jackson and Selena Jackson died from ligature strangulation. she noted that Selena's underwear had been rolled up, suggesting that the body had been redressed. Furthermore, Selena's rectum showed a similar dilation to her mother's, again indicating that an object was present in her rectum at or around the time of death. Julie Cox, a forensic scientist at the Bureau of Criminal Investigation, reported that the anal swabs taken from Selena Jackson contained seminal fluid. Cox also observed a suspicious stain on Selena Jackson's underwear, which she excised and tested, finding it to contain a sperm cell. The police were under pressure to swiftly identify and apprehend the culprit behind these heinous crimes. Heather's residence was conveniently located near Firelands Regional Medical Center, and investigators believed that surveillance footage from the building's CCTV cameras might aid in their search for the perpetrator. Upon reviewing the footage, they spotted a car pulling up to Heather's house at 10:57 p.m. However, the camera's distance from the house and the darkness hindered visibility. The car's headlights provided the only clues, revealing that the vehicle had backed into the driveway and remained stationary for some time. 11 minutes later, at 11:08 p.m., the headlights flickered back to life, and the driver departed the scene. Thomas Hansen and Dan Reiner, the two men who found Heather's body, were taken to the police station for questioning. Dan, who had been friends with Heather, was the first to be interrogated. He explained that when he learned Heather was missing, he went to her house to check on her. Dan admitted that he had to push the door hard to gain entry, and as a result, the police asked him to provide DNA samples. He consented, and a swab was taken from his mouth. After that, he was released. Next, the investigators questioned Thomas Hansen. He revealed that he had spoken to Heather over the phone the previous night and was near her house around 11 p.m. According to Thomas, he drove up to Heather's house but didn't enter. They chatted briefly outside, and then he drove home. This information helped the investigators identify the car seen on the CCTV footage as belonging to Thomas. Thomas also claimed that he didn't enter Heather's house that night because she wasn't alone. There was a man, known to him as Josh, inside with her. Hansen's statement echoed Reiner's. He claimed that upon learning of Heather's disappearance, he rushed to her house to investigate. After providing a DNA sample, he was released by the police. The police shifted their focus to Josh, who was at Heather's house shortly before her death. They quickly determined his whereabouts and brought him in for questioning. Josh acknowledged having known Heather for several years. He confessed to being at her house that night, stating that they watched TV while the kids slept in their room. He also mentioned visiting the store to buy breakfast for the children, returning to the house and staying for a while before a friend picked him up around 1 a.m. Notably, Josh admitted to having consensual, intimate contact with Heather. The investigators visited the store where Josh claimed to have purchased breakfast for the kids and reviewed the CCTV footage. The footage confirmed Josh's alibi, showing him entering the store at 11:20 p.m. However, this did not rule out the possibility that he was involved in the crime. As the last known person to have contact with Heather, Josh remained the prime suspect. Josh also provided a DNA sample, which was analyzed along with those of Thomas Hansen and Dan Reiner. The lab results cleared Hansen and Reiner, as their DNA did not match the DNA found on the victims' bodies. Josh's DNA, on the other hand, matched the DNA found on Heather's body, but not on her children's bodies. This indicated that there was another man present in the house that night. Josh had previously confessed to being in a romantic relationship with Heather, which accounted for his DNA being present on her body. However, the police were now tasked with identifying a different individual whose DNA matched the DNA found on the bodies of all three victims. The investigators quickly ruled out Heather's husband Wayne, who was in the process of divorcing her, as a suspect because he lived in a different state. The detectives then focused on Heather's cell phone records, hoping to find some answers. Upon receiving the report, they discovered that Heather had been very active on her phone, right up until the night of her death. Her last phone conversation took place at 3:12 a.m. and lasted 30 seconds. The police now needed to identify the owner of the phone number she had called. 36 hours after Heather's death, the police obtained additional CCTV footage. While analyzing it, the investigators noticed a white car pulling up to her house at around 3 a.m. This coincided with the time Heather stopped using her phone, which might not have been a coincidence. The officers also saw that the white car drove away about an hour later, around the time when Heather, Selena, and Wayne were likely already dead. Although the footage quality was poor and didn't allow the police to see the license plates, they were able to determine that the car was a Cadillac. Once the investigators received information from the phone company about the owner of the phone number Heather had called, they had a lead. The number belonged to 41-year-old Curtis Clinton. It was with him that Heather had her 30-second phone conversation at 3:12 a.m. Curtis Clinton's background check revealed alarming details. Police records showed that Clinton was released from prison in February after serving a 13-year sentence for 2 counts of felonious assault and involuntary manslaughter. He had pleaded guilty to the 1997 murder of 18-year-old Misty Keckler from Fostoria, who was found strangled, naked, and bound in a bathtub. The similarity to Heather's case, combined with the fact that Clinton was released from prison just 6 months prior to Heather and her children's death, raised concerns among investigators. It seemed possible that Clinton had reverted to his previous violent behavior. Furthermore, Clinton owned a white Cadillac, which made him the prime suspect. The police urgently needed to locate him to prevent any further harm. If Clinton was indeed responsible for the murders, he had to be stopped before he could harm anyone else. The police went to Clinton's last known address, but he was not there. A few hours later, a patrol officer found a white Cadillac on a nearby street, but Clinton himself was still missing. A search of the vehicle revealed a receipt from a gas station on the night of the crime. The investigators headed to the gas station to review the CCTV footage. On the recordings, they identified Clinton and his distinctive white Cadillac. Despite already knowing that Heather and her children were deceased, Clinton was seen purchasing water and beer, displaying a calm demeanor. Fearing Clinton might flee, the investigators nonetheless soon received a tip that a patient named Curtis Clinton had been admitted to a local hospital. They swiftly arrived at the hospital and apprehended the suspect they were pursuing. Clinton was arrested and taken into custody, but he vehemently denied any involvement in the tragic deaths of Heather Jackson and her children. During questioning, Clinton revealed that he had been in a romantic relationship with Heather for 5 months, providing her with both financial and emotional support to cope with her numerous personal issues. Clinton claimed to have limited knowledge of Heather's children and stated that he last saw Heather on Tuesday, September 6th. He alleged that on that day, he gave her $328 and they engaged in an intimate encounter. The investigator told Clinton that phone records revealed a 3:12 a.m. call with Heather on September 8th. Clinton corrected himself, saying he had gotten his days wrong, and it was actually Friday night or early Saturday morning when he last saw Heather, not Thursday night. According to Clinton, he didn't stay at her house for long, dropping off the money and engaging in intimate contact before leaving. He explained, "I did my thing and left, but couldn't recall what time he got home." Clinton claimed that someone else must have gone to Heather's house after he left. He said that while he was with Heather, she mentioned that somebody had texted or called her, and she seemed irritated. When informed that he was the last person who had contact with Heather, Clinton denied. However, the examination indicated the opposite. The DNA on the bodies of all 3 victims belonged to Curtis Clinton. Therefore, he was arrested and placed in the county jail. Curtis Clinton was charged with multiple counts during the investigation. It also turned out that 6 days before the death of Heather and her children, Curtis Clinton attacked a 17-year-old girl whose identity was not disclosed by the police. He choked her and forced her to have intimate contact with him. When he let her go, she went to the hospital, and the police at the hospital doctors took DNA samples from her body, which also led to Curtis Clinton. Clinton moved for a change of venue, arguing that extensive media coverage had saturated the county at the time of the offenses, and was likely to resume once the trial started. The trial court denied the motion for a change of venue, stating that while the pre-trial publicity was extensive and adverse to the defendant, the publicity was not sufficiently prejudicial that readers and viewers could not realistically shut it from sight. The court rejected claims of presumed prejudice, stating that the defendant, Curtis Clinton, did not hesitate to take the lives of Heather, Selena, and Wayne, and that his DNA was found inside Selena's body before she died. Clinton knew he was facing the death penalty, but he did not want to die and therefore did everything to achieve a different outcome in the trial. He even remembered what justice was when allowed to speak before being sentenced for the capital crimes. Clinton neither begged for his life nor apologized to the victim's family. Instead, he lashed out at the prosecutor, Kevin Baxter, and vowed he would win on appeal and have his case retried. He stated, "I don't respect the prosecutor, and as I said, I will be back again. I know there's a lot of people who are upset here, but I'm the one who's going through this." This statement triggered a disgusted response from some of the 70 people present at the hearing in November 2013. Curtis Clinton was given the death penalty for the murders of Heather Jackson and her 2 young children. When he learned he would be executed by lethal injection, Clinton became violent towards Heather's brother, who expressed a preference for Clinton to die in prison at the hands of other inmates. Deputies and court staff restrained Clinton, who was handcuffed, and pushed him into a chair, while other officers restrained Heather's brother as they exchanged profanities in a packed Erie County courtroom. Heather's brother was angry, stating that the only thing Clinton should be grateful for is that his life was spared by being placed on death row, and that he wished Clinton had been given a life sentence in prison, allowing his friends to harm him. The judge also sentenced Clinton to life in prison without parole for the murder of 3-year-old Selena, and an additional 10 years in prison for assaulting a 17-year-old girl 6 days before the murder of Heather and her children. In 2018, the Ohio Supreme Court postponed Curtis Clinton's execution, which was scheduled for September 15, 2021, pending the exhaustion of all state post-conviction proceedings, including any appeals. As of now, Curtis Clinton remains on death row, and his sentence has been upheld, but his execution will not take place in the near future. Ohio is currently holding over 100 inmates on death row, but Governor Mike DeWine is doubtful that any of them will be executed in the remaining 3 years of his term. The last execution in the state took place on July 18, 2018, and since then, Ohio has had an effective halt on capital punishment. According to Governor DeWine, the reason for this is that lethal injection is the only approved method of execution in Ohio. But pharmaceutical companies have threatened to retaliate if the state uses their products for this purpose. This would have a significant impact on the state's health department and other agencies. The governor has told the state legislature that the only way to resume executions is to change the law to permit alternative methods of execution. But so far, the legislature has not taken any action, and DeWine does not expect them to do so. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Keely Bunker. What happens when a trusted friend who is meant to keep you safe turns out to be the very monster you should flee from? In the case of Keely, she discovered the dark and unsettling truth behind her friend's seemingly innocent smiles. But unfortunately, it was too late. This is the heart-wrenching story of Keely Bunker. We extend our heartfelt condolences to the family and friends of Keely, who will forever cherish her memory. Before the 19th of September 2019, Keely was full of life. Born on the 7th of September 1999, Keely was both a blessing to her parents and a role model to her siblings. Her mother described her as a precious and beautiful daughter, while her sister described her as one of the most vibrant, caring, and beautiful souls this earth has ever seen. She was a go-getter who had worked her way through the hurdles of life to get a degree and become a teacher. On the day she met her tragic fate, she was to go in for an interview to become an assistant teacher. But that promising life was cut short by her childhood friend, Wesley Street. Wesley and Keely had known each other since they were in infant school. Although they might not have been best of friends, they were quite close because they maintained their friendship through the years. It was for this reason Keely invited him to her 20th birthday celebration after the musician H's concert at the O2 on the 18th of September 2019. Keely was very excited about that day. On the day of the concert, Keely and her best friend, Monique Riggin, met Wesley at the New Street station in Birmingham. After the concert, the trio went to a nightclub where they partied till 2:40 a.m. Then they got a taxi back to Tamworth, where they stayed. Keely's house was a walking distance from where they alighted, and Monique had asked her to stay the night due to concerns about her safety. But Keely didn't want to miss the job interview she had fixed the next day, and said, "I've got Wes, he'll walk me back, it'll be fine." That was the last time Monique saw her. The next day, Keely didn't get to the interview, and friends and family tried to contact her. By 5:30 p.m. that day, her father filed a missing persons report. After reaching out to friends, the police discovered Wesley was the last person to see her, and he was immediately brought in for questioning. The 20-year-old man claimed to have parted ways with Keely when they reached a telephone box close to his home, leaving her to walk the rest of the path alone. As part of the investigation, the police officers told him to take them to the exact location, and he pointed it out. He even showed the officers the exact route they had walked to that very spot, and they couldn't be more grateful for his help, so they let him go. But at 9 p.m., her uncle, Jason Brown, who was part of the search party, discovered Keely's body submerged in a pond in Wigington Park in Tamworth. Her clothes had been taken off, and there were marks on her neck, indicating that she had been strangled to death. It was a horrifying sight. Wesley immediately became the first suspect. The police arrested Wesley, and the interrogation began. He stuck on the fact that he had left Keely alive at the telephone box. But when they went through his mobile phone, his GPS showed that he went to the location of the murder 7 times that day. And when he tried to argue his innocence, the CCTV footage showed him and Keely by Tamworth Rugby Club later than the time he claimed to have left her. His bank card and jacket were found in the park, and the post-mortem examination of Keely revealed Street's DNA. With this evidence, he was charged with the sexual assault and murder of Keely. Initially, during the trial, Wesley kept arguing his innocence. He mentioned that he was so drunk, he messed up the description of how the night went. He promised that he had left her happy, and she seemed happy. However, later into the trial, he claimed to have accidentally killed her during consensual sex in the park. He said Keely had flirted and teased him as they walked home, and in the end, they had found themselves in the park. But you should note that before that confession, he claimed that they were childhood friends who had never entertained any ideas of romance, so it was clear that he kept changing his statements to go in line with the evidence that was being presented. Wesley went on to describe how his GPS location showed him returning to the murder spot several times that day. He said that after accidentally murdering her during a moment of passion, he dumped the body in the pond and kept returning to the location to cover Keely with branches. When he was asked why he didn't tell the truth, when he was asked by the police and Keely's relatives before the body was discovered, he said, "I didn't know how to act and explain to other people how she died, because I felt embarrassed in myself and very scared to explain to the police, everyone, my mom and dad. However, the evidence presented by the prosecution showed otherwise. On their walk home, Wesley had persuaded Keely to go towards the rugby club close to the park on the pretext of going for a smoke. On getting to the park, he had forced himself on her and held her in a chokehold while she was fighting for freedom. His claims that he killed her in a moment of passion couldn't have been possible because it would take more than a few seconds for her to die. Then, when she died, he took her to the pond, covered her up with branches, and went home. The evidence presented before the jurors was already enough to find him guilty. But before the sentencing date, more chilling evidence about Wesley's horrible nature came to light. Due to the severity of the case, media outlets were quick to post details about the trial. This unknowingly triggered a reaction from women who had been previous victims of Wesley. In the court, Wesley portrayed himself as a young man who had made innocent mistakes. His father also testified that he was autistic and needed help understanding the proceedings of the trial. However, 3 women who had been victims of his sexual assault came forward to completely refute any claim of his innocence. In the year 2015, he sexually assaulted a 16-year-old girl. In 2017, his victim was a 15-year-old girl. And just a few months before Keely's death, his victim was another 20-year-old. Although investigations show there was a possibility there were more victims, those 3 were the only ones courageous enough to step forward. One of them told the court that she thought she was never going to get over it, but she had fought the sickening thoughts that almost overwhelmed her. Another said she was really scared to tell anyone because of how ashamed she felt. But after hearing about Keely's case, she just couldn't remain quiet. The third survivor shared how she blamed herself for the incident because she had gone to his house. Hannah Sway, the lead prosecutor, described Wesley's offense as a pattern of offending. She described Wesley as a man who tried to get what he wanted without having any regard for the consequences. She also mentioned that his innocent look and friendly character made his victims less wary of him. Reports show that his victims were either friends or acquaintances. It's easy to have a stereotypical image of a perpetrator, but what we often do not think about is a young lad who is popular, who has many friends, who is well known and liked, said Detective Inspector Cheryl Hannon, the senior investigating officer on the case. She also described Wesley as a devious and manipulating character, noting his arrogance in playing the martyr. He acted as if people were blaming him unfairly when he knew full well where she was and what he'd done, and the efforts he'd gone to concealing it to delay people finding her. His friend trusted him to walk her home that night, and it's only Wesley to blame that she didn't make it home. He was trusted to walk her home, but he manipulated the situation, preyed upon her, and ultimately raped and murdered her. He then went on to put himself at the center of the investigation, lying to the police, her family, and her friends that she was safe and well, changing his lies as the evidence was presented to him. Wesley was sentenced to 30 years in prison without parole. During the sentencing, the judge described how Wesley had cut the beautiful life of Keely short, just to satisfy his desires. She lost the opportunity of fulfilling her life ambition of helping to educate young children, and her family had lost the company of their beloved daughter, sister, and niece. Keely's relatives also shared how they would never completely heal enough to forgive Wesley. Her mother, Debbie, said that as Keely's family, the outcome of this trial will never be enough in terms of justice. Keely was the kindest, most caring, and innocent young lady, and she was only just starting out in her life. Such is the hell they feel. They are incapable of showing any forgiveness. The horrible fate of Keely is a reminder that we can never truly tell who a person is. Everyone should always take precautions when they're out so late, because a person who you might deem your protector might actually be the predator. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of a family in Covina. We inhabit a world where the fragility of human existence is constantly on display. One moment, you may be reveling in the joys of life surrounded by loved ones, and the next, they are calling out for help, their bloodied hands reaching towards you, while you are paralyzed, your own life flashing before your eyes. This is not a scene from a movie, but a harrowing and horrific reality. It is true that we each have but one life, yet death can be a brutal, unpredictable, and intrusive force. Imagine a Christmas party with loved ones gathered together, celebrating the holiday season. However, the joyful gathering was suddenly transformed into a horrific tragedy. On December 24, 2008, in the small town of Covina, California, the Covina massacre occurred, leaving 9 people dead and the community in a state of shock. Gunshots echoed, and a devastating arson fire engulfed the home, trapping the victims inside. What was meant to be a festive celebration turned into a nightmarish scenario. Many were injured, and numerous unanswered questions remained. It was a profoundly sorrowful and terrifying moment, leaving the community to grapple with the underlying causes of this unspeakable act of violence. The Covina massacre remains a haunting reminder that even in the most joyful times, darkness can strike without warning. The Ortega family was having a great time together in their Covina home on Christmas Eve. In the dining room, Papa Joe Ortega, his wife of 53 years, and their children were playing a late-night game of Texas Hold'em. They had just finished dinner and were enjoying each other's company. The grandchildren were in the backyard playing video games and hanging out near the pool. They were having so much fun that they didn't want the night to end. Meanwhile, upstairs, the Ortega's 17-year-old grandson, Michael, was sitting at his computer, typing away. It was a peaceful and happy moment, with everyone doing something they enjoyed. But little did they know, this peaceful night was about to turn into a horror movie. Suddenly, there was a knock at the front door. The 8-year-old girl was so excited, she squealed with delight, "Santa Claus! Santa Claus!" A man dressed as Santa Claus walked in, pulled out a gun, and shot the little girl right in the face. 2 of her uncles tried to protect her, but they were also shot and fell to the ground. The rest of the family, including the Ortegas and 3 of their daughters, tried to hide under the dining table, but it was too late. The fire, which was ignited by a flamethrower device, was incredibly intense and caused a massive explosion that sent flames shooting up into the air. The flames reached a height of 40 to 50 feet, which is as tall as a 5-story building. It was a substantial blaze that required a significant amount of manpower to extinguish. In fact, it took a team of 80 firefighters over an hour and a half to finally put out the fire. It must have been a terrifying and perilous situation for the people in the house and the firefighters who were trying to save them. The fire was so intense that it made it extremely difficult to identify the victims. The flames were so strong that they severely damaged the bodies, making it impossible to recognize them. Therefore, the investigators had to use other methods to determine the identities of the victims. They utilized dental records, such as X-rays of teeth, and medical records, including scars or other unique features, to identify the victims. It was a challenging task, but they were able to use these clues to piece together the identities of those present on that tragic night. The Ortega family's worst fears became a reality that night. The assailant, Bruce Jeffrey Parro, was unrelenting. He killed Papa Joe and his wife, 4 of their children, 2 daughters-in-law, and even the 17-year-old grandson who was peacefully sitting at his computer. No one was spared. The entire family, who had been joyfully celebrating Christmas Eve just moments earlier, was mercilessly murdered. There were around 25 to 30 people celebrating Christmas Eve with the Ortega family. However, after the tragic incident, the survivors did not want to discuss it publicly. Nevertheless, some individuals working on the investigation provided information that corroborated the accounts given by the family members. This information helps us understand what transpired within the house. The family members described a very frightening scene. A man with a gun intended to harm and kill people. The family members attempted to flee and save their loved ones, but it was extremely challenging due to the overwhelming fear and confusion. When Bruce got to the party, many of the adults were near the front door because some people were preparing to leave, which made them easy targets when the attack began. Family members stated that Charles, one of the Ortega sons, identified the gunman after the gunman shot Charles's 8-year-old niece and his older brother James. Someone shouted, "It's Bruce!" Charles was shot right after James. It was an extremely frightening and perilous situation, and everyone was trying to flee from the gunman. Irma Chapo Ortega, a close family member, shared a heartbreaking detail about the tragedy. She said that James and Charles Ortega, despite being wounded, tried to get up and stop the gunman. They were badly hurt, but they still tried to stand up and grab him. Unfortunately, they were unable to do so. Irma also said that the older Ortegas, Joseph and Alicia, and their 3 daughters, along with one of their daughters-in-law, Teresa, hid under the dining room table. She had been in touch with some of the family members who survived the attack, and they shared these details with her. Someone yelled out, "Run, run!" and chaos erupted. The Ortegas and 2 of their daughters, Sylvia and Alicia, might have been killed while they were still in the dining room, but their daughter Leticia, whose little girl was badly hurt, managed to survive. Leticia had hidden under the table for a short time, and she called 911 and told the police dispatcher that she heard the shots, and everyone started panicking and running, and they all dove under the dining room table. Chapa shared a heroic story about her cousin Leticia. She said Leticia saw her injured daughter stumbling out of the house and decided to flee. According to a person close to the investigation, even though the gunman shot the little girl in the face, she may have saved her own life by turning her head at the last moment. The bullet hit her jaw, but fortunately, it did not kill her. The person who provided this detail preferred to remain anonymous, as the police were still investigating the incident. The investigators believe that most of the young people were saved because they were in the back of the house near the TV, likely playing video games, when the gunman started shooting. The 8-year-old girl was injured, and a 16-year-old girl was shot in the back, but fortunately they survived. The only young person who did not make it was Michael Ortiz, a 17-year-old, who was sitting at the computer upstairs. Chapa said that Michael was probably killed by the explosion or fire that started when the gunman used a homemade device to set the house on fire. A law enforcement source said it appears that Michael was killed as a result of the fire or explosion and was not shot. It's a tragedy that a young life was lost in such a senseless act of violence. Michael's mother, Alicia, was also killed. But why did the murderer commit such a brutal act of violence? Bruce, a 45-year-old man, was very angry about his marriage ending. He and his wife had just gotten divorced, and he was consumed by hurt and anger. Instead of dealing with his emotions in a healthy manner, he decided to take revenge on her and her family. He chose a tragic and devastating way to do it by attacking them at their annual Christmas party in Covina, California. A team of FBI experts studied Bruce's behavior and found that he had some mental health issues, including extreme narcissism and obsessive-compulsive disorder. Although these conditions are not an excuse or justification, they likely contributed to his decision to commit such a horrific act. It's heartbreaking that a family's joyous celebration turned into a tragedy because of one person's anger and sickness. Bruce had a plan to escape after his attack on the Ortega family. He had even bought a plane ticket to Illinois, thinking he could just leave the chaos behind and start fresh. But his plan didn't work out as he expected. When he set the house on fire, he badly burned himself, suffering 2nd and 3rd-degree burns on his arms, which are very painful and serious injuries. Instead of escaping, he was left with severe burns. It's amazing how his plan backfired and led to his own suffering. After his failed attempt at escape, Bruce drove 40 miles to his brother's house in Sila. He went there to end his own life. Lieutenant Fred Corral from the Los Angeles County Coroner's Office shared that Bruce had a wound on the top of his head, which suggests that he put the gun in his mouth before pulling the trigger. A toxicology test had to be taken on Bruce, and it was said to have taken up to 6 weeks to get the result. This test would show if Bruce had any drugs or alcohol in his system at the time of his death. When the police searched Bruce's body, they found something strange. He had wrapped $177,000 in cash around his legs with plastic wrap and was wearing a special underwear called a girdle to keep it in place. They also found his rental car parked a walk away from his brother's house. But when they tried to move the car, they realized it was rigged with a dangerous device that would explode if they touched it. The police had to be very careful inside his brother's house. They found 4 empty handguns and a lot of bullets, over 200 rounds. They also found some leftover pieces from his Santa suit that were rigged to explode. Back at Bruce's own house in Montrose, California, the police found even more dangerous things. Empty boxes that had held semi-automatic handguns, a special kind of shotgun called a Benelli M2 Tactical, and a container for a type of gasoline that was highly flammable. But what was most shocking was what they called a virtual bomb factory in his home. It was like a secret workshop where he had been making dangerous devices. It's lucky the police were able to find all of this before anyone else got hurt. On the outside, Bruce Parro seemed like a really charming and generous person. When the witness first heard about it, they knew he was wearing a Santa suit and had seen him more than once, but they didn't think anything of it until they were told that he had used the Santa suit to hide guns and other weapons. That's when it kind of freaked them out, thinking that maybe he had already planned this for a long time. Even the people who knew him best had no idea what was going on behind closed doors. They didn't know that long before his divorce was finalized, Bruce had started secretly collecting weapons and planning an elaborate escape plan. He was living a double life, and no one suspected a thing. In 2004, Bruce Parro met Sylvia Ortiz. They were introduced by her brother-in-law, who worked with Bruce at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory. Sylvia was 40 years old and had 3 kids from 2 previous marriages. Bruce's friends thought she was perfect for him, a kind and practical woman with a big family who could help him settle down and be happy. At first, Bruce was drawn to his wife's warm and welcoming family, but after the first year of their marriage, she told friends he had become cold, miserable, and distant. They often argued about money. In March 2008, Bruce and Sylvia decided to separate. Sylvia asked Bruce if she could stay in their home until her daughter finished kindergarten, but Bruce wasn't having it. While Sylvia was out at a family gathering, Bruce packed up all her stuff and left it on the driveway. Sylvia was devastated and had to move in with her sister in Glensdale, eventually filing for divorce. Bruce went to Gun World in Burbank on June 13th and bought a handgun for almost $1,000 cash. He got fired on July 31st for fraud and tried to get unemployment benefits, but couldn't get them. He went back to Gun World on August 8th and bought another handgun, keeping coming back to the store and buying a total of 5 handguns. He also ordered a Santa suit from a costume store, saying it was for a kid's party, and paid a $200 deposit. Bruce also went to a gun shop in Iowa and bought 16 magazines that can hold 18 bullets each, way more than California laws allow. Just a week before Christmas, his marriage to Sylvia was officially over. They had been having too many problems and couldn't fix them, so the judge ended their marriage in a courthouse in Bank just before Christmas. Bruce Parro rented 2 cars, a Dodge and a Toyota. He packed the Toyota with all sorts of stuff like maps, water, food, clothes, and a can of gasoline. He also put in 2 computers. Later that night, his neighbor Bong Garcia saw him leaving in the Dodge, which was weird because he usually drove his fancy Escalade Hummer. Bruce said he was off to a Christmas party but Bong thought it was strange. As the house burned, a neighbor saw a blue car drive away with its headlights off. A pair of fake glasses and Santa's hat had been dropped in the front yard. Bruce drove to his brother's house in Sylmar, 40 miles away. He was badly burned with severe injuries on his arms, hands, neck, and legs. His Santa suit had melted into his skin, and he was in a terrible state. When his brother got home at 3:10 a.m., he found Bruce's body on the couch with 2 guns next to him. He had shot himself in the mouth while still wearing his wedding ring. Letitia Youssef Sky is a strong woman who chooses not to let anger and hate consume her. She says she can't do anything to change what happened, and she can only focus on what's brought to her and the good things that are brought to her. She is grateful for the love and support she's received from people she didn't even know, and this gratitude has helped her heal. Letitia has also stopped dwelling on the past and the person who hurt her family. She says she won't allow him to consume them with his evilness, and instead chooses love and encourages others to do the same. Letitia believes love is the strongest energy and that it can bring people together and help them heal. She also thinks it's important to teach our children about love and kindness so they can grow up to be good examples for others. She says our kids are our future, and we have to be an example for them. If we teach them that it's okay to hate, it's okay to be violent, and make them feel less than, then what hope do we have? During a school walkout, Katrina Y.F. Sky could read the names of the 17 victims killed in Parkland, Florida, 1 month ago. Gun violence is personal for the Lal High School student. Nearly 10 years ago, she survived a Christmas Eve massacre when she was only 8. Being able to really fight for something that is truly close to my heart is very different. 12 years have passed, and Letitia and Katrina Youssef Sky are working hard to keep their family's tradition and happy memories alive. The family still gets together for dinner, exchanges gifts, and shares stories about their loved ones who are no longer with them. On Christmas Eve, they visit the cemetery where their family members are buried instead of going to church. One of the nephews who lost both his parents in the tragedy has become the guardian of his 3 younger siblings. Letitia and her husband took in her sister's youngest daughter, and Letitia worked hard to make sure the surviving kids still had a sense of Christmas. She told them that the Santa who came that night wasn't the real one. The kids even went to a special camp to help them deal with their grief and trauma. Letitia says, no matter where you look, there are memories of what they used to have, and then memories of that terrible night. You can't escape it, but even with all the pain, Letitia knows that Christmas will always be special, and they will keep celebrating no matter what. Even though the investigation ended almost 10 years ago, the detectives who helped the family still keep in touch, especially around Christmas. They care about the family and want to make sure they're doing okay. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of a family in Covina. We inhabit a world where the fragility of human existence is constantly on display. One moment, you may be reveling in the joys of life surrounded by loved ones, and the next, they are calling out for help, their bloodied hands reaching towards you, while you are paralyzed, your own life flashing before your eyes. This is not a scene from a movie, but a harrowing and horrific reality. It is true that we each have but one life, yet death can be a brutal, unpredictable, and intrusive force. Imagine a Christmas party with loved ones gathered together, celebrating the holiday season. However, the joyful gathering was suddenly transformed into a horrific tragedy. On December 24, 2008, in the small town of Covina, California, the Covina massacre occurred, leaving 9 people dead and the community in a state of shock. Gunshots echoed, and a devastating arson fire engulfed the home, trapping the victims inside. What was meant to be a festive celebration turned into a nightmarish scenario. Many were injured, and numerous unanswered questions remained. It was a profoundly sorrowful and terrifying moment, leaving the community to grapple with the underlying causes of this unspeakable act of violence. The Covina massacre remains a haunting reminder that even in the most joyful times, darkness can strike without warning. The Ortega family was having a great time together in their Covina home on Christmas Eve. In the dining room, Papa Joe Ortega, his wife of 53 years, and their children were playing a late-night game of Texas Hold'em. They had just finished dinner and were enjoying each other's company. The grandchildren were in the backyard playing video games and hanging out near the pool. They were having so much fun that they didn't want the night to end. Meanwhile, upstairs, the Ortega's 17-year-old grandson, Michael, was sitting at his computer, typing away. It was a peaceful and happy moment, with everyone doing something they enjoyed. But little did they know, this peaceful night was about to turn into a horror movie. Suddenly, there was a knock at the front door. The 8-year-old girl was so excited, she squealed with delight, "Santa Claus! Santa Claus!" A man dressed as Santa Claus walked in, pulled out a gun, and shot the little girl right in the face. 2 of her uncles tried to protect her, but they were also shot and fell to the ground. The rest of the family, including the Ortegas and 3 of their daughters, tried to hide under the dining table, but it was too late. The fire, which was ignited by a flamethrower device, was incredibly intense and caused a massive explosion that sent flames shooting up into the air. The flames reached a height of 40 to 50 feet, which is as tall as a 5-story building. It was a substantial blaze that required a significant amount of manpower to extinguish. In fact, it took a team of 80 firefighters over an hour and a half to finally put out the fire. It must have been a terrifying and perilous situation for the people in the house and the firefighters who were trying to save them. The fire was so intense that it made it extremely difficult to identify the victims. The flames were so strong that they severely damaged the bodies, making it impossible to recognize them. Therefore, the investigators had to use other methods to determine the identities of the victims. They utilized dental records, such as X-rays of teeth, and medical records, including scars or other unique features, to identify the victims. It was a challenging task, but they were able to use these clues to piece together the identities of those present on that tragic night. The Ortega family's worst fears became a reality that night. The assailant, Bruce Jeffrey Parro, was unrelenting. He killed Papa Joe and his wife, 4 of their children, 2 daughters-in-law, and even the 17-year-old grandson who was peacefully sitting at his computer. No one was spared. The entire family, who had been joyfully celebrating Christmas Eve just moments earlier, was mercilessly murdered. There were around 25 to 30 people celebrating Christmas Eve with the Ortega family. However, after the tragic incident, the survivors did not want to discuss it publicly. Nevertheless, some individuals working on the investigation provided information that corroborated the accounts given by the family members. This information helps us understand what transpired within the house. The family members described a very frightening scene. A man with a gun intended to harm and kill people. The family members attempted to flee and save their loved ones, but it was extremely challenging due to the overwhelming fear and confusion. When Bruce got to the party, many of the adults were near the front door because some people were preparing to leave, which made them easy targets when the attack began. Family members stated that Charles, one of the Ortega sons, identified the gunman after the gunman shot Charles's 8-year-old niece and his older brother James. Someone shouted, "It's Bruce!" Charles was shot right after James. It was an extremely frightening and perilous situation, and everyone was trying to flee from the gunman. Irma Chapo Ortega, a close family member, shared a heartbreaking detail about the tragedy. She said that James and Charles Ortega, despite being wounded, tried to get up and stop the gunman. They were badly hurt, but they still tried to stand up and grab him. Unfortunately, they were unable to do so. Irma also said that the older Ortegas, Joseph and Alicia, and their 3 daughters, along with one of their daughters-in-law, Teresa, hid under the dining room table. She had been in touch with some of the family members who survived the attack, and they shared these details with her. Someone yelled out, "Run, run," and chaos erupted. The Ortegas and two of their daughters, Sylvia and Alicia, might have been killed while they were still in the dining room, but their daughter Leticia, whose little girl was badly hurt, managed to survive. Leticia had hidden under the table for a short time, and she called 911 and told the police dispatcher that she heard the shots, and everyone started panicking and running, and they all dove under the dining room table. Chapa shared a heroic story about her cousin Leticia. She said Leticia saw her injured daughter stumbling out of the house and decided to flee. According to a person close to the investigation, even though the gunman shot the little girl in the face, she may have saved her own life by turning her head at the last moment. The bullet hit her jaw, but fortunately, it did not kill her. The person who provided this detail preferred to remain anonymous, as the police were still investigating the incident. The investigators believe that most of the young people were saved because they were in the back of the house near the TV, likely playing video games, when the gunman started shooting. The 8-year-old girl was injured, and a 16-year-old girl was shot in the back, but fortunately they survived. The only young person who did not make it was Michael Ortiz, a 17-year-old who was sitting at the computer upstairs. Chapa said that Michael was probably killed by the explosion or fire that started when the gunman used a homemade device to set the house on fire. A law enforcement source said it appears that Michael was killed as a result of the fire or explosion and was not shot. It's a tragedy that a young life was lost in such a senseless act of violence. Michael's mother, Alicia, was also killed. But why did the murderer commit such a brutal act of violence? Bruce, a 45-year-old man, was very angry about his marriage ending. He and his wife had just gotten divorced, and he was consumed by hurt and anger. Instead of dealing with his emotions in a healthy manner, he decided to take revenge on her and her family. He chose a tragic and devastating way to do it by attacking them at their annual Christmas party in Covina, California. A team of FBI experts studied Bruce's behavior and found that he had some mental health issues, including extreme narcissism and obsessive-compulsive disorder. Although these conditions are not an excuse or justification, they likely contributed to his decision to commit such a horrific act. It's heartbreaking that a family's joyous celebration turned into a tragedy because of one person's anger and sickness. Bruce had a plan to escape after his attack on the Ortega family. He had even bought a plane ticket to Illinois, thinking he could just leave the chaos behind and start fresh. But his plan didn't work out as he expected. When he set the house on fire, he badly burned himself, suffering second and third-degree burns on his arms, which are very painful and serious injuries. Instead of escaping, he was left with severe burns. It's amazing how his plan backfired and led to his own suffering. After his failed attempt at escape, Bruce drove 40 miles to his brother's house in Sila. He went there to end his own life. Lieutenant Fred Corral from the Los Angeles County Coroner's Office shared that Bruce had a wound on the top of his head, which suggests that he put the gun in his mouth before pulling the trigger. A toxicology test had to be taken on Bruce, and it was said to have taken up to 6 weeks to get the result. This test would show if Bruce had any drugs or alcohol in his system at the time of his death. When the police searched Bruce's body, they found something strange. He had wrapped $177,000 in cash around his legs with plastic wrap and was wearing a special underwear called a girdle to keep it in place. They also found his rental car parked a walk away from his brother's house. But when they tried to move the car, they realized it was rigged with a dangerous device that would explode if they touched it. The police had to be very careful inside his brother's house. They found 4 empty handguns and a lot of bullets, over 200 rounds. They also found some leftover pieces from his Santa suit that were rigged to explode. Back at Bruce's own house in Montrose, California, the police found even more dangerous things. empty boxes that had held semi-automatic handguns, a special kind of shotgun called a Benelli M2 Tactical, and a container for a type of gasoline that was highly flammable. But what was most shocking was what they called a virtual bomb factory in his home. It was like a secret workshop where he had been making dangerous devices. It's lucky the police were able to find all of this before anyone else got hurt. On the outside, Bruce Parro seemed like a really charming and generous person. When the witness first heard about it, they knew he was wearing a Santa suit and had seen him more than once, but they didn't think anything of it until they were told that he had used the Santa suit to hide guns and other weapons. That's when it kind of freaked them out, thinking that maybe he had already planned this for a long time. Even the people who knew him best had no idea what was going on behind closed doors. They didn't know that long before his divorce was finalized, Bruce had started secretly collecting weapons and planning an elaborate escape plan. He was living a double life, and no one suspected a thing. In 2004, Bruce Parro met Sylvia Ortiz. They were introduced by her brother-in-law, who worked with Bruce at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory. Sylvia was 40 years old and had 3 kids from 2 previous marriages. Bruce's friends thought she was perfect for him, a kind and practical woman with a big family who could help him settle down and be happy. At first, Bruce was drawn to his wife's warm and welcoming family, but after the first year of their marriage, she told friends he had become cold, miserable, and distant. They often argued about money. In March 2008, Bruce and Sylvia decided to separate. Sylvia asked Bruce if she could stay in their home until her daughter finished kindergarten, but Bruce wasn't having it. While Sylvia was out at a family gathering, Bruce packed up all her stuff and left it on the driveway. Sylvia was devastated and had to move in with her sister in Glensdale, eventually filing for divorce. Bruce went to Gun World in Burbank on June 13th and bought a handgun for almost $1,000 cash. He got fired on July 31st for fraud and tried to get unemployment benefits, but couldn't get them. He went back to Gun World on August 8th and bought another handgun, keeping coming back to the store and buying a total of 5 handguns. He also ordered a Santa suit from a costume store, saying it was for a kid's party, and paid a $200 deposit. Bruce also went to a gun shop in Iowa and bought 16 magazines that can hold 18 bullets each, way more than California laws allow. Just a week before Christmas, his marriage to Sylvia was officially over. They had been having too many problems and couldn't fix them, so the judge ended their marriage in a courthouse in Bank just before Christmas. Bruce Parro rented 2 cars, a Dodge and a Toyota. He packed the Toyota with all sorts of stuff like maps, water, food, clothes, and a can of gasoline. He also put in 2 computers. Later that night, his neighbor Bong Garcia saw him leaving in the Dodge, which was weird because he usually drove his fancy Escalade Hummer. Bruce said he was off to a Christmas party, but Bong thought it was strange. As the house burned, a neighbor saw a blue car drive away with its headlights off. A pair of fake glasses and Santa's hat had been dropped in the front yard. Bruce drove to his brother's house in Sylmar, 40 miles away. He was badly burned with severe injuries on his arms, hands, neck, and legs. His Santa suit had melted into his skin, and he was in a terrible state. When his brother got home at 3:10 a.m., he found Bruce's body on the couch with 2 guns next to him. He had shot himself in the mouth while still wearing his wedding ring. Letitia Youssef Sky is a strong woman who chooses not to let anger and hate consume her. She says she can't do anything to change what happened, and she can only focus on what's brought to her and the good things that are brought to her. She is grateful for the love and support she's received from people she didn't even know, and this gratitude has helped her heal. Leticia has also stopped dwelling on the past and the person who hurt her family. She says she won't allow him to consume them with his evilness, and instead chooses love and encourages others to do the same. Leticia believes love is the strongest energy and that it can bring people together and help them heal. She also thinks it's important to teach our children about love and kindness, so they can grow up to be good examples for others. She says our kids are our future, and we have to be an example for them. If we teach them that it's okay to hate, it's okay to be violent, and make them feel less than, then what hope do we have? During a school walkout, Katrina Y.F. Eskai could read the names of the 17 victims killed in Parkland, Florida, 1 month ago. Gun violence is personal for the Lal High School student. Nearly 10 years ago, she survived a Christmas Eve massacre when she was only 8. Being able to really fight for something that is truly close to my heart is very different. 12 years have passed, and Leticia and Katrina Youssef Sky are working hard to keep their family's tradition and happy memories alive. The family still gets together for dinner, exchanges gifts, and shares stories about their loved ones who are no longer with them. On Christmas Eve, they visit the cemetery where their family members are buried instead of going to church. One of the nephews who lost both his parents in the tragedy has become the guardian of his 3 younger siblings. Leticia and her husband took in her sister's youngest daughter, and Leticia worked hard to make sure the surviving kids still had a sense of Christmas. She told them that the Santa who came that night wasn't the real one. The kids even went to a special camp to help them deal with their grief and trauma. Leticia says, no matter where you look, there are memories of what they used to have, and then memories of that terrible night. You can't escape it, but even with all the pain, Leticia knows that Christmas will always be special, and they will keep celebrating no matter what. Even though the investigation ended almost 10 years ago, the detectives who helped the family still keep in touch, especially around Christmas. They care about the family and want to make sure they're doing okay. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Maria Ladenburger. Maria Ladenburger, a 19-year-old from Freiburg, sparked widespread outrage in German society and raised serious concerns about the local police and the German government as a whole. Born on December 6, 1996, to Clemens and Friederike Ladenburger, Maria's parents were both lawyers, with her father holding a high-ranking position in the European Union. At the time of her death, Maria was a medical student at the University of Freiburg. In addition to her studies, she volunteered part-time at a local center that provided aid to immigrants. On the night of October 15, 2016, Maria attended a party hosted by the medical faculty, where she socialized with friends until around 2:30 a.m. Since she lived on campus, approximately 3 miles from the university, she decided to ride her bike back to her dorm. Tragically, at 2:37 a.m., Maria was last seen riding her bike towards campus. Several hours later, at 8:20 a.m., a jogger discovered her lifeless body in the River Dreisam, about a mile away from where she was last seen. Despite an immediate call to the police and ambulance, medical professionals were unable to revive her. The incident raised numerous questions about the efficiency of the local authorities and the government's response to similar cases. During the forensic examination, investigators determined that Maria's death was caused by drowning. Additionally, they found evidence that someone had attempted to strangle her with a scarf, which was discovered at the scene. The scarf contained a sample of male DNA, believed to belong to the perpetrator. Near the crime scene, police found several black hairs, 7 inches long, with bleached ends in the bushes. The hairs had roots, allowing authorities to obtain another sample of male DNA. This sample matched the one found on the scarf used to strangle Maria. Despite this evidence, the police were unable to identify the owner of the DNA samples, as no matching information existed in their databases. On November 8th, the authorities offered a €6,000 reward for information that could help solve the case. Thanks to several individuals, the reward amount was soon increased to €35,000. The police conducted an extensive investigation into Maria's death, questioning over 1,000 people, including those who attended her last party. Additionally, more than 100 individuals voluntarily submitted DNA samples for comparison. However, none of the DNA samples from party attendees matched the DNA evidence found at the crime scene, leaving the police without a DNA match. The public was shocked and alarmed when the details of Maria's death were published in the press, and as a result, residents of Freiburg rushed to buy pepper sprays, fearing for their safety, since the perpetrator was still at large. There was also an increase in reports of women being harassed in the city, with two similar incidents occurring in the same area, one just days before Maria's death and another 2 weeks prior. As a consequence, self-defense classes became extremely popular in Freiburg, with many people enrolling in local sports centers to learn how to protect themselves. Meanwhile, to boost security, 25 extra police officers have been deployed to patrol the city streets. Due to the high crime rate, many people are too intimidated to venture out alone at night. The police pursued all potential clues, but the breakthrough in identifying the perpetrator came from the hair and scarf found at the crime scene. With the description of the sought-after individual being a male with long black hair featuring bleached ends, the authorities began scrutinizing footage from numerous city cameras. Upon reviewing the CCTV recordings from the city tram, they spotted a man with a similar hair color and length. The individual in question sported an undercut hairstyle, characterized by short hair on the sides and back, and longer hair on top. This particular footage was captured on the night of October 16th at 7 a.m., approximately 40 minutes prior to Maria's departure from the party. The suspect boarded a tram near the university and, after a 20-minute ride, disembarked at the final stop, which was less than a mile from the location where a jogger subsequently discovered Maria's body. Notably, the suspect had harassed two girls on the tram, though they eventually managed to extricate themselves from his unwanted attention. On December 3, 2016, nearly 7 weeks after Maria's death, the police arrested 17-year-old Hussein Kavari as a suspect. Initially, authorities believed him to be an immigrant from Afghanistan. However, during the investigation, it emerged that he was not 17 and not from Afghanistan. Kavari had entered Germany in November 2015 without an ID card, claiming to be from Afghanistan and born in 1999. Kavari said he was 16 when he arrived, but he lacked documents to support or disprove this. Due to his claimed age, Germany granted him asylum as an underage unaccompanied refugee. He was placed with a foster family in a scenic town near the Black Forest, where he attended school, learned German, and received government benefits. It turned out that fabricating his age was a common tactic, which provided advantages not only when applying for asylum, but also in case of committing crimes, as juvenile offenders face less severe punishment. The suspect's age will be revisited later, as it's just one aspect of his troubled biography. After the police arrested Hussein Kavari as the prime suspect in the Maria Ladenburger case, his image was published in the media. Although German media outlets blurred his face, TV channels and newspapers in other European countries did not, publishing unobstructed pictures of him. A Greek lawyer, Maria Eleni Nenkop, recognized Kavari after seeing his photos in the media. She had previously defended him in court in the spring of 2013, when he was charged and found guilty of a life-threatening attack on a young student on the Greek island of Corfu. Kavari claimed his father had died many years ago in Afghanistan, but the police discovered his father was actually alive and living in Iran. The court was able to determine Kavari's age more accurately after the prosecutor contacted his father by phone. According to his father, Kavari was born in Iran on January 29, 1984, which made him 32 years old at the time of Maria's death. As a result, he was tried as an adult. During the trial, Kavari stated that a few hours before the attack, he and his friends had consumed a large amount of alcohol and taken prohibited substances. After partying, he took a tram to the area where he later attacked Maria. In her free time, Maria worked part-time at the Immigrant Assistance Center in Freiburg, where she tried to help people in difficult life situations. Ironically, she was killed by one of the people she was trying to help. The crime sparked widespread public outrage and disgust, prompting social media users to post sarcastic thank you messages to Chancellor Angela Merkel, criticizing her liberal policy that allowed over 1 million refugees and immigrants into the country. During the trial, Prosecutor Ertberer emphasized to the 2 jurors and 3 judges that the focus was on the criminal offender, not Germany's refugee policy. Kavari broke down in court as he read a heartfelt apology to the victim's family. He claimed to be haunted by nightmares of Maria's death every day. "I offer my sincerest apologies to Maria's family," he said. "I wish I could turn back time and undo the harm I've caused. I'm deeply remorseful for my actions, and the guilt is consuming me from the inside out. The agony of what I've done is destroying my life, piece by piece." Hussein Kavari shared his harrowing journey from Iran to Germany, highlighting struggles in Greece and Slovenia. He spoke candidly about scavenging for food, engaging in illegal activities, and living with a foster family in Germany, where he turned to substances and alcohol. Kavari revealed psychological issues, including nightmares and insomnia, stemming from concerns about his homeland. Kavari recalled killing Maria Ladenberger after a night of heavy drinking and drug use. He harassed girls on a tram, then stole a bike but fell off due to intoxication. That's when he saw Maria, pushed her off the bike, and strangled her with a scarf until she lost consciousness. He was attracted to her beauty and took advantage of her state. He carried her into the water, where she drowned. Kavari claimed he was too intoxicated to control his actions, but prosecutors argued his actions were deliberate and premeditated. A psychiatric expert told the court that, in their professional opinion, Kavari's display of remorse was not genuine. They testified that Kavari had consistently shown a strong tendency towards violence and warned that there was a high risk of him committing another offense. The expert also stated that Kavari had a fascination with aggressive sexual practices and held hostile views towards women. Furthermore, they noted that Kavari lacked remorse and compassion for the harm and suffering he had caused to others. Maria's parents hired a lawyer to represent them at the trial, opting out of attending due to concerns about emotional statements from victims' families influencing the outcome. They also wanted to avoid media hype and politics. They considered meeting the perpetrator, but decided against it, believing Maria wouldn't want them to, and that it wouldn't achieve anything positive. On Sept 22, 2018, Judge Catherine Shank found Hussein Kavari guilty. Before sentencing, Kavari was handcuffed and wore a black hooded jumper, showing a lack of empathy that drew applause. He received a life imprisonment sentence, but under German law, he's eligible for early release after 15 years if deemed no longer a threat. However, Judge Shank emphasized the severity of his guilt, making early release unlikely. Friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The incredible case of Michelle Whitaker. Michelle Laurel Whitaker was born on August 16, 1969, as the fourth of 5 children to her parents. According to her mom, Laura Andrews, Michelle was extremely close to her entire family. However, this changed when they moved from Illinois to Gastonia, North Carolina, and Michelle's once happy demeanor began to fade. As she entered her teenage years, Michelle and her mom began to clash frequently, primarily due to her mom's strictness. After graduating from high school, Michelle got married, but the union lasted less than a year. Her inexperience and youth made it difficult for her to handle the problems her partner created. The abusive treatment by her husband marked the beginning of a prolonged and distressing period in Michelle's life. Those close to her believe this tumultuous period led to her later struggles. At the time, she struggled to cope and made poor choices as a result. After her divorce, Michelle's family moved to Spartanburg, South Carolina. By the time she was 30, Michelle was struggling with alcohol addiction and had already had 3 failed marriages. She was working part-time as a waitress and was barely getting by. One evening in 1999, Michelle met a man named David after her shift ended, and he offered to give her a ride home. Michelle accepted, but soon regretted her decision. Instead of taking her home, David took her to a secluded area where he assaulted her and forced her into intimate contact. He was arrested a year later, pleaded guilty to assault and battery, and received an 8-year prison sentence. Just before she disappeared, Michelle was arrested for driving under the influence of alcohol. Michelle's parents decided it was time to take drastic measures. They contacted the police and asked them to hold Michelle in custody until a spot in a rehabilitation center became available. Although it was a difficult decision, her parents felt it was the only way to help Michelle in her situation. However, Michelle became extremely upset by this, and from that point on, her relationship with her mother significantly deteriorated. Unfortunately, Michelle was mistakenly released from jail without receiving the court-ordered treatment for her substance and alcohol abuse. On August 5, 2002, Michelle had an argument with her mother and stormed out of the house in a bad mood. 3 days later, the man she was staying with contacted her mother, Laura Andrews, to inform her that he couldn't find Michelle after they had had an argument. This is how Laura learned of her daughter's disappearance. Laura immediately sought help from a friend who worked at the local police station. But the police, familiar with Michelle's lifestyle, advised her to wait a little longer, assuring her that Michelle would likely show up on her own. However, 2 weeks passed and Michelle failed to return home. On August 21, 2002, Laura filed an official missing persons report, and local law enforcement began investigating Michelle Whitaker's disappearance. During their investigation, they discovered the last place Michelle was spotted, a truck stop. This information came from a local resident named Doug, who had met Michelle by chance on the street the day before she disappeared. Doug recounted that he had stopped his motorcycle outside a bar where Michelle was sitting and struck up a conversation with her. Michelle told him that she had had a fight with her boyfriend and he had thrown her out of the house. Later that evening, they visited 2 bars together, playing a few games of billiards at one of them. They then took a ride on Doug's motorcycle until dawn, after which they went to his house. Thus, it was revealed that Michelle Whitaker had spent her last evening visiting local bars, and Doug was the last person to have seen her alive. This made Doug the prime suspect in Michelle's disappearance. According to his testimony, Michelle had planned to go to Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, a resort city on the Atlantic coast, where she hoped to earn good money working in local bars and restaurants. Doug claimed that he dropped Michelle off at a truck stop, but only after giving her some clothes, including a t-shirt and shorts, and some money to buy coffee and newspapers. He said he wished her good luck before leaving. To verify Doug's story, the police gave him a lie detector test, which he passed. They also tested the man Michelle had been staying with before she vanished, but found no evidence to suggest he was involved in her disappearance. The police began to consider the possibility that Michelle had actually gone to Myrtle Beach, which is approximately 250 miles from Spartanburg. A few more weeks went by, but there was still no sign of Michelle. Her family and friends were growing increasingly anxious. Despite her anger and resentment towards her parents, they couldn't bring themselves to believe she would abandon her family and go into hiding. Michelle's prolonged disappearance made the local sheriff question her motives. When people travel for extended periods, they typically take some personal belongings with them, but Michelle had left with almost nothing. Moreover, she had a beloved pet dog to which she was deeply attached. Every detective interviewed agreed that Michelle would never willingly abandon her dog. In the meantime, Michelle's parents began driving around the neighborhood, hoping to find any clue that might lead them to their daughter. After receiving multiple tips that Michelle had been spotted on a beach in North Carolina, they headed there immediately. They spent 3 days searching for her, posting flyers and talking to locals. but their efforts ultimately proved fruitless. After 6 months of unsuccessful searches, Laura Andrews started questioning whether her behavior towards her daughter had been right. She had witnessed her daughter's downward spiral and couldn't just stand by. Laura wanted to protect her in any way possible. Additionally, she suspected that the 1999 brutal attack Michelle suffered might have contributed to her disappearance. Laura couldn't forgive herself for the hurtful words she spoke to Michelle after the attack, despite the assault being a terrible act by a stranger. Laura initially blamed Michelle for taking a destructive path and causing harm to herself, which only damaged Michelle's self-esteem further with her words. From the sheriff's office, it was assumed Michelle had motives to escape due to her reputation. Detectives thought she'd eventually be arrested, but a year passed with no results. The police were alarmed that Michelle left no digital traces, which wasn't a good sign. Both police and family wondered if Michelle was a crime victim, possibly falling prey to a truck driver, but this theory remained unsubstantiated. 2 more years passed with no leads. On the 3rd anniversary of Michelle's disappearance, after police and Laura Andrews visited the truck stop where Michelle was last seen, local TV stations revisited the story. Just days after Michelle's story aired on TV news, the Spartanburg County Sheriff's Office received a strange letter. The anonymous letter, handwritten on a small sheet of paper, claimed to reveal the location of Michelle Whitaker's body. A crude, homemade map accompanied the letter, pinpointing the exact spot. Despite its amateurish appearance, the letter was well written and proper, lending it an air of credibility. The sheriff, accompanied by search dogs, embarked on a search of a rural area 25 miles from where Michelle was last seen. This development came 3 years after her disappearance, and her family was torn between despair and hope. Some had reluctantly accepted that Michelle might be dead, while others clung to the possibility that she was alive and safe. The search dogs were unable to detect any scent, and the operation was eventually called off. Although relieved that no body was found, the investigators remained perplexed by the letter. A handwriting analysis and DNA evidence from the envelope suggested that the author was a woman, but her identity remained unknown. In 2006, Michelle's parents relocated to Rock Hill, South Carolina, which is 65 miles from Spartanburg. A year later, on the 5th anniversary of Michelle's disappearance, the whole family gathered at the church. Michelle's mother, Laura Andrews, did not want to treat the gathering as a memorial service because Michelle's body had not been found, and there was still a faint hope that she might be alive. Another year passed, and Detective William Gary took over the investigation of Michelle's disappearance. At the time, he was handling a dozen unsolved cases, including Michelle's. Since many years had gone by without any evidence that Michelle was still alive, her case was considered a felony. The lack of evidence led the investigators to believe that something tragic had likely occurred. As the 6th anniversary of Michelle's disappearance approached, on August 4, 2008, Detective Gary received a call from a woman claiming to know Michelle's whereabouts. She said Michelle was living in Oregon. The woman had seen Michelle's file on an episode of Forensic Files and a website created by Laura, which helped her recognize Michelle as a woman who had been living with friends for 6 years, unaware that her family had been searching for her. After receiving the mysterious message, the investigators were understandably cautious. Detective William Gary, for evidence, requested that the woman send a photo of Michelle. He then showed the picture to Detective Wood, who had previously worked on the case and immediately recognized her. Promptly, an Oregon State police officer was dispatched to the address in question to confirm Michelle's identity. In a remarkable coincidence, on August 5, 2008, exactly 6 years after Michelle's argument with her mother and her departure from home, Detective Laura Andrews received a call informing her that her daughter had been found alive. Laura struggled to process the news, and only after hanging up the phone did a flood of questions arise. Where is she? How is she? and what had she been doing all this time? Although the news was welcome, a family reunion was not possible at this point. The police were bound to respect Michelle's privacy and could not disclose her whereabouts to her parents. It was up to Michelle to initiate contact with her family. The detectives tried to persuade Michelle to talk to her relatives, if only to alleviate their concerns. The next evening, Michelle phoned her mother. 2 weeks later, at Atlanta Airport, Michelle and her family had a long overdue reunion. She confessed that she was exhausted from her former way of life. After her argument with her mom, Michelle came to a realization. She believed her family would be better off without her around. Initially, when Doug dropped her off at the truck stop, Michelle had planned to head to Myrtle Beach to find work. But instead, she hitchhiked and ended up in Las Vegas, then California, and eventually Oregon. Michelle offered apologies to both her family and the police, who had invested considerable time and resources into searching for her over the past 6 years. She had been living under her real name, and it never occurred to her that anyone was still looking for her. Friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Stacy Smith. Born on September 21st, 1977, Stacy Ann Smith was known to her family and friends as a beautiful and outgoing person. During her school days, she was a popular cheerleader who attracted a lot of male attention. After graduating, she met Stephen, the love of her life, and they decided to spend the rest of their lives together. In June 2002, they welcomed a daughter named Mackenzie, and soon after, they got married, believing their happiness would last forever. 4 years later, Stacy and Stephen had a son named Landon. However, their relationship began to deteriorate, and they eventually broke up in 2009. At the time, Landon was 3 years old, and Mackenzie was 7. The family lived in St. Albans, West Virginia. After her divorce, Stacy was determined to make her children happy. One day, she ran into an old acquaintance, Brent, on the street. They had attended high school together, and Brent had had a crush on her back then, although she didn't feel the same way. However, this chance encounter sparked a romance between them. As they got to know each other better, Stacy's ex-husband, Stephen, became aware of her new relationship. He would often see Stacy and Brent together when he came to pick up the kids for the weekend. Initially, Brent got along great with Stacy's children, which made her happy. However, as time went on, their relationship began to experience some turbulence. They started to have frequent arguments, mostly due to Brent's jealousy. He tried to exert control over certain aspects of her life, such as wanting to know who she was talking to on the phone. Despite their breakups, they would eventually reunite after calming down. On Christmas Eve in 2009, Stacy moved into a new home with her kids. Her cousin Timothy and boyfriend Brent lent a hand in decorating the house for Christmas and creating a warm ambience. A few days later, on December 28, 2009, Stacy's father, John Paul, attempted to reach his daughter by phone but received no response. As the hours ticked by with no answer or callback from Stacy, John grew concerned and decided to investigate. He got in the car and drove to the house where Stacy lived with her kids, a place they had occupied for only a few days before Christmas, and he wanted to check on their well-being. When John arrived at the house, everything seemed normal. He knocked on the front door and called out his daughter's name, but there was no response. The door was locked, so he looked through the window and spotted 3-year-old Landon inside. John caught Landon's attention and asked where his mom, Stacy, was. Landon replied that she was asleep. John's instincts told him something was off. Stacy wasn't a heavy sleeper and would have woken up from the knocking on the door. John instructed Landon how to open the door, and once inside, he told the boy to wait in the living room while he checked on Stacy. As John entered the kitchen, he was met with a horrific scene. Stacy's body lay lifeless on the floor, surrounded by bloodstains. The same gruesome sight extended into Stacy's bedroom. John instantly dialed 911 and requested assistance. The the police thoroughly searched the house to ensure the perpetrator was not concealed inside. It was evident that Stacy's death was not accidental. The woman had succumbed to a fatal neck stab wound. A message on one of the walls caught the detective's attention immediately. The individual who penned it accused Stacy of being unfaithful. The message consisted of only 2 words, cheating, and a second word starting with W. It was particularly heartbreaking that Landon spent most of the day by himself while his mother lay dead. Forensic analysis revealed the boy's bloody footprints next to Stacy's body, indicating he had approached his mother, likely attempting to rouse her. At just 3 years old, he probably didn't comprehend that his mother wasn't simply sleeping. The police collected all possible evidence from the house, including cigarette butts and beer cans, which could provide DNA clues. However, the writing on the wall was the most intriguing piece of evidence for the investigators. They needed to identify who wrote it and why. Given the crime's motive was likely jealousy, and the extreme cruelty suggested a revenge attack, the perpetrator could be someone Stacy knew and trusted. There were no signs of forced entry, implying Stacy had let the killer into her home. The police also found Stacy's car and car keys missing, as well as her phone and the murder weapon. They issued a description of the car to all patrolmen, suspecting the criminal might have used it to flee the scene. Stacy's tragic death was devastating for her loved ones, especially her children, who had to come to terms with never seeing their mother again. Psychologists spoke with Landon to see if he had witnessed anything unusual, but the boy couldn't assist the police. Upon waking, he found his mother on the floor. Thinking she was asleep, he tried to rouse her, but she didn't respond. The prime suspect in this crime could be someone who believed Stacy had been unfaithful to them. Initially, there were 2 main suspects: Stacy's boyfriend, Brent, and her ex-husband, Stephen. Stephen might still have had strong feelings for Stacy, and despite their divorce, he might have been angry that she had moved on to another man. Brent, on the other hand, was known to be jealous, which could have led him to suspect Stacy of cheating. When investigating cases like this, detectives must consider all possible scenarios, no matter how unlikely they may seem at first. They were also looking into the possibility of a secret admirer or unknown romantic interest that even Stacy's closest friends and family might not have been aware of. As a young and attractive doctor's assistant, Stacy would have naturally attracted attention from men. While patrol officers were scouring the streets for Stacy's vehicle, investigators conducted interviews with her family members. Following these conversations, Stacy's boyfriend, Brent, emerged as the prime suspect. Her family and friends were well aware that Brent had a jealous streak and frequently became violent when he suspected Stacy was in contact with others. He had a volatile temper, prone to outbursts over trivial matters, which had led Stacy to sever communication with him on multiple occasions. Given this profile, the detectives pinpointed Brent as a key person of interest and decided to track him down for questioning. Their goal was to determine if he had any involvement in the crime and to confirm his whereabouts at the time of Stacy's death, while also observing his reactions to their inquiries. Brent was still at his country house before heading out, making it easy to track him down. Investigators secured a search warrant and found him in his garage when they arrived. Although he became nervous at the sight of the police, this didn't necessarily imply anything, as many people get anxious when officers show up at their doorstep. The investigators informed Brent of the search warrant for his home and that it was related to the investigation into Stacy Smith's death. Brent appeared to be genuinely shocked by the news and seemed devastated by grief. But the question was this just an act? The investigators aimed to find out when they took him to the police station for further questioning. Brent's behavior during the interrogation only heightened the police's suspicions about him. He admitted that his relationship with Stacy was unstable and marked by frequent arguments. According to Brent, their last altercation occurred on the day before her death. He told investigators that Stacy had cheated on him with one of his friends, which had severely damaged their relationship. Although some time had passed since then, the betrayal still lingered. Brent claimed that on December 27th, he had gone home after they quarreled, but returned to Stacy's house a couple of hours later. They had a calm conversation, and intimacy ensued. He left around 2 a.m. when Stacy's son Landon and her cousin Timothy were asleep in the house. Brent maintained that there were no issues between him and Stacy when he departed, and he was unaware of her death until the police informed him. However, no one could corroborate his alibi, which led investigators to question his story. As a result, they asked Brent to take a polygraph test to gauge his responses. After initial hesitation, Brent agreed to the test, hoping to clear his name. He passed the test without any issues. Initially, the police considered removing him from the list of suspects, but during the polygraph test, they noticed a small red spot on Brent's shirt that resembled dried blood. When questioned, Brent attributed the spot to a minor injury he had sustained the day before, claiming it was his own blood. However, only an expert examination could confirm or refute this statement. To verify Brent's testimony, the detectives decided to interview Stacy's cousin, Timothy, assuming Brent was telling the truth. As the last person to see Stacy alive, Timothy was a crucial witness. However, a major obstacle emerged. Timothy had vanished. Following the news of Stacy's death, the entire family gathered, but Timothy was nowhere to be found. He didn't answer his phone, and his whereabouts remained a mystery. This concerned both the family and the police, particularly given Timothy's history of substance abuse and potential debts. They feared that someone he owed money to might have taken revenge, but something had gone terribly wrong. Another stage has been added to the ongoing investigation. As previously noted, Stephen, Stacy's ex-husband, was one of the initial suspects in the crime. It's possible that Stephen was enraged by Stacy's relationship with Brent, even before their divorce was finalized. Although they were no longer living together, Stacy's actions may have offended Stephen, prompting him to commit the crime and leave a provocative message on the wall. Furthermore, one of Stephen's possible motives could have been related to his children, whom he only saw on weekends, and perhaps he wanted full-time custody. When Stephen arrived at the police station for questioning, he remained calm and composed, denying any involvement in Stacy's death. He claimed he would never harm the mother of his children. According to Stephen, his divorce from Stacy did not lead to animosity between them. In fact, he shared the same suspicion as her family, that Brent was responsible for the crime. Stephen provided an alibi for the night of the crime, which the police quickly verified, ruling him out as a suspect. Meanwhile, investigators searched for Stacy's car, only to discover that the vehicle in question was actually owned by her boss, Dr. William Casto. This raised the possibility of another romantic interest in Stacy's life. Further investigation revealed a romantic relationship between Stacy and Dr. Casto. Colleagues reported that the two were very close, and at some point, Dr. Casto had even given Stacy a car as a gift. This new information added Dr. Casto to the list of potential suspects, with the police considering the possibility that he might have discovered Stacy's relationship with Brent and taken drastic action. With all this in mind, the detective began searching for Dr. Casto, who didn't try to hide and went about his daily routine. After learning about Stacy's death and that the investigators wanted to speak with him, William Casto voluntarily went to the police station. During the interrogation, he admitted to having an intimate relationship with Stacy and giving her the car. According to him, they had been in a consensual relationship for several years before her death, and he would often help her with her problems. Casto denied any involvement in the crime, stating he had no motive to harm Stacy. He was forthcoming with the investigators, providing them with his alibi for the night of the crime. This solid alibi allowed him to be ruled out as a suspect. Now that Casto was no longer a suspect, the police still needed to identify who had written the offensive message in Stacy's house, and who she had offended so deeply. Was there another man in her life? The police had to find answers to these questions. Meanwhile, the police used GPS tracking technology to locate Stacy's car, which they found in a deserted parking lot, about 5 miles from her house. Investigators believed the vehicle held the key to solving the case. Patrol cars were dispatched to the location, and the car was towed to the police parking lot for forensic examination. Although Stacy's credit cards and personal belongings were found inside, there was no knife linked to the crime or any other evidence. A surprising development emerged in the investigation when the police looked into Timothy's background, Stacy's missing cousin. It turned out that he had a criminal history, including a previous conviction for a sexual offense and theft. According to the charges, Timothy had molested a girl, but he claimed she had lied about her age, and he thought she was above the legal age limit. Timothy served time in prison for this offense and was required to register as a sex offender, but he failed to do so. Timothy Ray Sutherland contacted the police 2 days after Stacy's death, claiming to be staying at a local motel and denying any involvement in her murder. However, he was wanted for arrest due to his failure to register as a sex offender. When the police arrived at the motel, Timothy had escaped, but his girlfriend told them he was hiding in an abandoned trailer on the other side of town. He was arrested on December 30th, 2009, and taken to the police station for questioning. During the interrogation, investigators asked Timothy to corroborate Brent's alibi, which was that he had stayed at Stacy's house with her and her son. Timothy confessed to being at his cousin's house that night, where Brent and Stacy had gotten into a fight. Timothy's cousin accused Brent of killing Stacy, stating that Brent was not a good person and did not care about or respect Stacy. When questioned about why he had left the crime scene, Timothy explained that he was afraid of being arrested due to his unregistered sex offender status. In essence, Timothy accused Brent of Stacy's murder. However, after receiving the lab report, these allegations became less credible. The dried blood on Brent's shirt was found to be his own, not Stacy's. As a result, the police could not find any evidence linking Brent to the crime. Consequently, the circle of suspects narrowed to focus on Timothy and Landon, who were the only ones remaining in the house when Brent left. Clearly, 3-year-old Landon could not have committed this crime and written the offensive message on the wall, which meant Timothy was hiding something. The investigators noticed dried blood stains on Timothy's jeans and sent all his clothes to the lab for analysis. Despite this, he continued to insist that Brent was responsible for Stacy's death. The investigators persisted in questioning him, and eventually, he told the truth. Timothy Sutherland let Brent yell at his cousin, Stacy Smith, and she always forgave him. One night, they had a fight in front of Timothy, and Brent stormed off. But a few hours later, Brent came back, and Stacy forgave him yet again. Timothy was angry about this and led Brent into Stacy's bedroom, where it was clear they were making up. After Brent left, Timothy went to Stacy's bedroom to talk to her. The court documents describe what happened next, without going into unnecessary detail. In 2009, Timothy Sutherland was staying with his cousin, Stacy Smith, in St. Albans, West Virginia. On December 28, 2009, Timothy got into an argument with Stacy in her bedroom. When Stacy called him a junkie, Timothy became enraged at being accused of being a drug addict. He left the bedroom, went to the kitchen to smoke a cigarette, and then returned with a butcher knife. He stabbed Stacy in the neck as she lay on the bed, then fled the scene. Mr. Sutherland took possession of Miss Smith's personal belongings, including her cell phone, credit card, money, and car keys. Additionally, he vandalized a living room wall in the house by writing the word "cheating" on it. According to Timothy, after he injured Stacy, she was able to get out of bed and take a few more steps. At the time, her son was asleep in another room, and her daughter was staying overnight with friends. As Timothy recounted these events to the detectives, he became emotional and appeared genuinely remorseful. He also revealed the location of the murder weapon stating that he had thrown the knife he used to kill Stacy out of the car window near her house. The police later found the knife at the exact location Timothy specified. Furthermore, laboratory analysis revealed that Timothy's jeans were stained with Stacy's blood. When questioned about the wall writings, he claimed he wanted to frame Stacy's boyfriend, Brent, as the prime suspect in her murder. Given their frequent arguments, he hoped people would assume Brent had killed her out of jealousy. However, Brent suspected there was more to it. He believed Timothy harbored romantic feelings for his cousin and was envious of her. That fateful night, Timothy sat in the living room armchair, overhearing Brent and Stacy's activities in the bedroom. Maybe his jealousy boiled over, causing him to lose control and commit an irreparable act. The police explored the possibility that Timothy might have attempted to coerce Stacy into a romantic encounter after Brent left, but they found no concrete evidence to support this theory. With only 2 people aware of what transpired that night, and one of them deceased, the truth remained elusive. Although Timothy Sutherland initially confessed to the crime during his interrogation, he later claimed innocence at his first court hearing in 2010. Despite this, the authorities had gathered sufficient evidence to secure a conviction. The central issue was whether the jury would believe the prosecutor's claim that the crime was premeditated, or the defense lawyer's argument that Timothy committed the crime in a fit of passion. The series of events leading up to the crime suggested that Timothy was fully aware of his actions. He had an argument with Stacy, left her bedroom, went to the kitchen to smoke a cigarette, and then returned with a knife. On March 18, 2011, the jury delivered a guilty verdict, and Timothy Ray Sutherland was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. 2 years later, in 2013, he attempted to appeal the verdict, but was unsuccessful. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Savannah Gold. In 2017, Sherry's world was turned upside down in Florida when her daughter Savannah failed to show up for work at the restaurant where she was employed. Sherry was unaware that this ordinary day would be the last time she'd see Savannah. An hour later, the restaurant called Sherry to inform her that Savannah hadn't arrived for her shift, which was unusual since she had never missed work before. However, the events that unfolded after that call were even more bizarre. When Savannah's father received a message on her behalf, riddled with spelling mistakes and lacking punctuation, he instantly knew it wasn't his 21-year-old daughter who had written it. The impersonator claimed Savannah had met an amazing guy, fallen in love, and decided to elope with him, promising to call later. Savannah's father, Daniel Gold, carefully read the text message, paying close attention to its content. He knew his daughter well and was convinced that running away with her boyfriend was out of character for her. While Daniel studied his phone screen, trying to make sense of the message, Savannah's older brother Chris received a similar text saying she was leaving with her boyfriend and that she was okay. Daniel's instincts told him something was wrong, so he immediately started calling his daughter's phone, only to find it turned off. Savannah Page Gold was born on April 26, 1996, to Daniel and Sherry Gold. She lived with her parents and older brother Chris in Jacksonville, Florida. Savannah enjoyed various hobbies, including playing lacrosse, drawing, and dancing. Those close to her believed she embodied her last name, being a loving, kind, and caring person always willing to help others. After graduating from high school, Savannah turned down a college scholarship for art and design to care for her mother, Sherry, who had been diagnosed with cancer and was undergoing chemotherapy. To support her mother, Savannah took on household responsibilities and also worked as a waiter at Bonefish Grill, a restaurant. By the summer of 2017, she had been working at the restaurant for 2 years. On August 2nd, Savannah left for work at around 5 p.m., wearing her uniform, as her shift was scheduled to start at 5:30 p.m. However, less than an hour later, Sherry received a call from the restaurant asking why Savannah had not shown up for work. This surprised Sherry, as she knew her daughter was responsible and had seen her leave the house in her uniform, indicating that she had indeed gone to work. After Savannah's father received a suspicious phone call, her father and brother started getting strange messages that they didn't think were from her. They suspected someone was impersonating Savannah. Before this, Savannah's father had tried to contact the police, but he couldn't reach his daughter. She was reported missing, and the police launched a search for her. Since sending those messages, Savannah's phone and social media accounts have been inactive. The police first went to the establishment where she worked to investigate. They found her unlocked car in the parking lot, about 120 yards from the restaurant entrance. Her personal documents, wallet, cards, cash, and other valuable items were still inside the car. It was clear to the police that the story about Savannah running away with her lover was a lie. If Savannah had planned to disappear, she would have taken her documents and bank cards with her to avoid being traced. It didn't make sense that she would leave them behind in her car. Initially, there were no signs of a struggle or crime near or inside the car, except for the flat left front tire. Forensic experts were called to investigate, and detectives visited the restaurant to speak with Savannah's co-workers. However, they all claimed that Savannah hadn't come to work that day and that no one had seen her. The presence of Savannah's car, parked 120 yards from the restaurant, led detectives to suspect that something might have happened to her after she arrived at work. They began canvassing local establishments, particularly those with surveillance cameras, to review the footage and identify the moment Savannah parked her car. Although the image quality was poor, the police were able to see from the footage that Savannah parked her car, got out, and walked to a nearby silver Chevrolet Malibu sedan. For 14 minutes, she stood next to the driver's door, talking to the person behind the wheel. She then opened the back door and got in, and the driver followed suit. The police watched as the car shook, and the back door swung open 3 times before being closed again. Officers suspected that a fight had broken out inside the car between Savannah and the Chevrolet's owner. Shortly after, the man exited the car, approached Savannah's vehicle, opened the driver's door, and removed something from inside. He then punctured the front left tire, got back into his vehicle, and drove away without Savannah ever getting out. The owner of the Chevrolet Malibu was quickly identified as Lee Rodarte, a 28-year-old manager and chef at the restaurant where Savannah worked. He had helped distribute flyers with Savannah's picture during the police investigation and claimed not to have seen her for about 3 weeks, citing their different work shifts. However, when detectives re-interviewed restaurant employees, they discovered that Lee and Savannah's relationship went beyond a professional one. Several people came forward to reveal that the two had met secretly after hours and were romantically involved, a fact that Lee had failed to disclose to the police. On August 5th, during his work shift, Rodarte was arrested and taken to the police station for questioning. When he arrived, he immediately warned the detectives that he struggled with reading and writing. In response, they thoroughly explained his rights, including his right to an attorney, and the fact that anything he said could be used against him in court. Rodarte then admitted that he had previously lied to the police when they interviewed the restaurant staff, saying he hadn't seen Savannah in a long time. In reality, he had seen her on the day she went missing, but he was afraid that if he told the truth, he would become a suspect in her disappearance, which is why he had lied. Lee said he had met Savannah about 2 years ago when she started working at the restaurant. However, their socializing outside of work began around 8 months ago. At that time, he was already in a relationship with someone named Chelsea. When Chelsea discovered he had been unfaithful to her, she ended their relationship. Rodarte claims he dated Savannah for 3 months before she started using illegal drugs, which led him to end their relationship and reunite with Chelsea. Following the breakup, Rodarte and Savannah allegedly agreed to maintain a professional relationship limited to their work at the restaurant, as per company policy prohibiting romantic relationships among employees. Rodarte also states that Savannah had disclosed their intimate relationship to other waiters, with the intention of getting him fired. Lee last saw Savannah on a Wednesday afternoon. He drove to the mall on August 2nd to talk to her and persuade her not to spread rumors about their relationship, as he feared losing his job at the restaurant where he had worked for 5 years. When he met her, Savannah had just taken a strong substance and was panicking, so she asked if she could sit in his car for a bit. Once inside, Lee demanded that she stop telling people they were still dating. Savannah asked him to join her in the back seat so they could talk. After moving to the back seat, Lee again asked Savannah to stop spreading rumors, but she refused, saying she would do as she pleased. This response infuriated Lee, who then got out, slashed a tire on Savannah's car, and returned. When Savannah asked why he had done it, Lee admitted he was upset and angry. Next, as Rodarte claimed, Savannah exited his vehicle and headed towards the mall entrance, but didn't reach it. Instead, she got into an old green Ford pickup truck with tinted windows. At this point, she was holding her phone. However, detectives were aware that Savannah never left Rodarte's car and that he was lying. Unbeknownst to Rodarte, the police had surveillance footage that disproved his claim, showing no Ford pickup truck and Savannah remaining in his car. When asked about subsequent events, Lee stated that he drove home, even detailing the streets he took. Notably, the man had scratches on his arms and neck, which he attributed to a workplace injury when questioned about their origin. When detectives directly asked Rodarte about Savannah's whereabouts, he claimed to have no knowledge. The detectives adjusted their questioning strategy. At first, they listened attentively to his stories, showing interest, but soon they applied gentle pressure. They informed him straightforwardly that evidence contradicted his claim that Savannah had exited his car. After a brief time, Rodarte altered his statement, asserting that he and Savannah had gone to his residence, and then she departed. The detectives remained skeptical and urged him to reveal the entire truth, considering Savannah's family's well-being. Rodarte ultimately admitted to fatally snapping Savannah's neck during a backseat argument in his vehicle. Following their departure from the parking lot, he sent messages to Savannah's father and brother from her phone before discarding it out the window. Rodarte returned the body to his property, intending to dispose of it by fire, but he soon discovered it wasn't as simple as he thought. Instead, he dug a hole and buried the body, only to later exhume it, wrap it in a blanket, and drive approximately 8 miles from the restaurant to a nearby pond, where he discarded the body. Although the autopsy couldn't determine the exact cause of Savannah's death, the examination revealed that her neck wasn't broken, as Rodarte had claimed, and no illegal substances were found in her body. However, forensic experts discovered that the thyroid cartilage in Savannah's throat was fractured, suggesting strangulation, and roughly 75% of her body exhibited fire damage. Despite confessing to the crimes, Rodarte maintained his not guilty plea on charges of second-degree murder, tampering with evidence, and abuse of a dead body. The autopsy revealed that the condition of Savannah's body was too compromised to determine an exact cause of death. Contrary to Rodarte's claims, her neck was not broken, and no illegal substances were found in her system. However, the autopsy did indicate that Savannah was strangled, as her thyroid cartilage was broken and approximately 75% of her body had been burned. Rodarte's confession was revoked at trial, where he claimed he acted in self-defense, alleging that Savannah had initiated the strangulation. This reversal put Savannah's family through additional trauma, forcing them to attend numerous court hearings. Cher Gold, Savannah's mother, has battled recurring cancer during this ordeal, but she remains committed to attending every hearing alongside her family. They have been present at 26 out of 27 hearings, enduring the emotional toll of facing Rodarte, the man responsible for their daughter's death. The The family's primary concern now is to bring this painful process to a close and secure justice for Savannah. Lee Rodarte was not the only family member to be charged with murder. In 2016, a year before Lee committed his crime, his sister Amber Camarillo, then 26 and still known by her maiden name Rodarte, shot and killed a woman during a dispute over a car. She received a 20-year prison sentence. Lee Rodarte was offered a plea deal, which required him to plead guilty to second-degree murder in exchange for a 40-year prison sentence. In return, the charges of tampering with physical evidence and abuse of the body would be dropped. After consulting with his attorneys, Rodarte accepted the deal and was sentenced to 40 years in prison on March 11, 2021. Following the verdict, Savannah's family expressed gratitude to everyone for their support. Daniel Gold stated that they loved Savannah and were overwhelmed to discover how many others also cared for her. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Shanae Brooke Edwards. Shanae Brooke Edwards was born in 1989 in Warrnambool, Australia. Shanae grew up with her parents and older brother Tyson. Although her early life and upbringing are not well documented, her loved ones remembered her as an adventure seeker who loved nature, hiking, motorcycling, and animals. She was a kind-hearted, genuine person who formed deep, sincere connections with others, showing generosity, patience, love, and kindness to everyone she met. In 2019, Shanae traveled to Georgia, a country that had long fascinated her with its natural beauty, rich history, and landmarks. Her boyfriend, Maori El Sayed, a Lebanese national, had planned to join her in Georgia, but was unable to do so because the country's borders were closed to unvaccinated individuals at the time. Shanae resided in Tbilisi, the capital of Georgia, where she worked as an English teacher. This allowed her to support herself financially while exploring the country and visiting new destinations. She formed close bonds with like-minded friends who shared her passion for travel. On July 29, 2021, Shanae uploaded a photo to her social media profile, captioning it with the single word, joy. The image was taken during a scenic motorcycle ride, an activity she thoroughly enjoyed. The following day, July 30, 2021, Shanae decided to hike up Matatsminda, a popular tourist attraction situated in the heart of Tbilisi. According to her friends, Shanae would often take leisurely strolls in the wooded area near the mountain, and she had never encountered any issues or threats to her personal safety. On July 30, 2021, Shanae left her residence around 3:30 p.m. and was last spotted near the Church of St. Michael of Tavare, located at the foot of Mount Matatsminda, which serves as a starting point for hikers. Shanae was scheduled to meet friends at a cafe in the capital city, but she failed to appear. When attempts to reach her by phone proved unsuccessful, her friends decided to file a missing persons report with the local authorities. Meanwhile, a friend of Shanae's living in California grew concerned and placed a call to Shanae's phone. When the call was answered, Shanae could be heard screaming, "Please let me go, okay? Just let me go," indicating that she was being attacked and desperately seeking release. The call was abruptly disconnected, and when Shanae's friend tried to call back, there was no answer. There are conflicting accounts of what Shanae's friend in California did next. According to some reports, she posted an urgent message to a Facebook group comprised of expats living in Georgia, asking someone to alert the police to the disturbing phone call. Other sources claim that Shanae's friend directly contacted the Georgian police and relayed the distressing details. It is certain that within hours of Shanae making a frightening phone call, Georgian police became aware of it and began to investigate. Hundreds of police officers and volunteers were deployed to search the area, focusing on the slopes of Mount Matatsminda. The search party utilized search dogs and drones, but Shanae remained missing. By sunset, her phone was still off, and she had not visited any local hospitals. This lack of progress was ominous, as was confirmed the following day. Tragically, On July 31st, after an extensive search, 31-year-old Shanae Brooke Edwards was discovered deceased near a hiking trail. The perpetrator attempted to conceal evidence by hiding the body under tree branches and leaves. A knife, believed to be the crime weapon, was found nearby. Shanae's phone was soon discovered on the mountainside. Further inspection of the crime scene revealed an old, rusty shovel, a fireplace, used needles, and numerous empty bottles. Georgia's Interior Minister revealed to local media that the police have uncovered information not yet disclosed to the public to protect the integrity of the investigation. He assured that the ministry and police officers are doing everything possible to find the perpetrator. The forensic examination of Shanae's body revealed 13 stab wounds, with 5 in the neck area, leading the police to conclude that the perpetrator undoubtedly intended to kill the young woman. Signs of strangulation were also found on her neck. After the authorities officially confirmed Shanae's death, the media reported that the crime was motivated by lust, but the Georgian police denied this, citing the forensic medical examiner's failure to find any signs of a crime against the woman's integrity. Shanae's boyfriend, Moody El-Sayed, has vowed to track down the culprit, no matter how long it takes, and exact revenge. Shanae's death was a devastating blow to her friends, and a particularly traumatic experience for her family, who lived on another continent. They faced the difficult task of transporting her body back home, while the police worked to identify the perpetrator. Although the police are directly responsible for preventing crimes and capturing criminals, in this case, there was an added concern. Georgia's billion-dollar tourism industry could be severely impacted by the fact that a tourist had lost her life in the capital city, a popular tourist destination. The police conducted an extensive investigation, interviewing over 200 people, including Shanae's friends, co-workers, neighbors, and employees and visitors of Matatsminda Park. They examined the roots of the case and reviewed video footage of Shanae's movements on the day she went missing. In an expat Facebook group, a local woman reported hearing a woman screaming on the trails below Matatsminda Park around an hour after Shanae left home. Another woman in the same group claimed to have witnessed a disturbing scene on the mountain the day before Shanae went missing, in which a man was seen aggressively assaulting a woman in the same area where the crime eventually took place. At the same time, the laboratory analyzed the crime weapon and discovered a male DNA sample, but no matches were found in the Georgian police database. Consequently, the samples were sent to the databases of 194 Interpol member states for further checking. Witness interviews revealed that Shanae had no enemies, no history of conflict with anyone, and no association with individuals of questionable character, suggesting she may have been a random victim of a crime with an unclear motive. The police conducted a meticulous investigation, collecting genetic samples from several dozen individuals who could potentially have been involved in the crime, and subjected each to rigorous scrutiny. Following a thorough and multifaceted investigation, authorities were able to narrow down the list of suspects until they found a DNA match. 40 days after Shanae Brooke Edwards' death, the Georgia police released a statement announcing the arrest of a 33-year-old man, Rafael Marsokolov, a Georgian citizen born in 1988. The evidence gathered during the investigation, including testimony, surveillance footage, genetic tests, and other proof, led to his arrest on September 8th. Marsokolov's lawyer stated that his client denies all charges, including robbery and the murder of Shanae Brooke Edwards, and has pleaded not guilty. The lawyer claimed that Marsokolov was not involved in the case and has chosen to exercise his right to remain silent. After Marsokolov's identity was made public, his image was broadcast on television. A woman from the Georgian capital took to Facebook to share a post revealing that her friend had been attacked by 2 men on Mount Matatsminda a few months prior. And although the police were aware of the perpetrators' identities, the case was closed. She suggested that if the police had done their job properly, the Australian girl might still be alive. Additionally, Marsokolov's own Facebook page revealed that he was an activist for the ruling Georgian Dream Party. On September 10, 2021, the Tbilisi court denied Markolov's request to be released on bail while awaiting trial, instead keeping him in custody. The police had obtained strong physical evidence, as well as damning testimony from Markolov's brother and wife, who revealed that Markolov had confessed to the crime at home. He warned them that if they told anyone about his involvement in Sinead Brooke Edwards' attack, their young child would face the same fate. In October 2021, the Edwards family wrote a heartfelt letter describing Sinead's personality and expressing gratitude to everyone who had supported them. They specifically thanked the government of Georgia for its financial assistance in repatriating Sinead's body and the Georgian people for their ongoing love, attention, and support during this difficult and tragic period. In February 2022, the first hearing on the case took place under Georgian law. Markolov faced a possible sentence of 16 to 20 years in prison. At the trial, he chose not to remain silent and pleaded guilty to robbery. However, he denied intentionally taking Sinead's life. The prosecutor disagreed, pointing out that the 13 stab wounds, including 5 to the neck, indicated Markolov's intent to kill the victim. After his knife broke, he even strangled Sinead. The defense claimed that Markolov has mental health issues and was in an abnormal state when the crime occurred. However, a psychological examination found him to be sane, allowing the court to impose a meaningful punishment based on the severity of the crime. The prosecutor noted that Markolov's blood tested positive for powerful drugs at the time of his arrest, but this did not diminish his guilt. Markolov admitted his guilt and apologized to Sinead Brooke Edwards' family in his final statement. According to the alleged motive, Markolov had intended to steal Sinead's iPhone 12, but his plan was foiled when she threw the phone into a ravine. Only 2 people knew what happened that day, and sadly, one of them is no longer alive to tell the tale. The prosecution requested a postponement of the sentencing, as the victim's brother, Tyson Edwards, wanted to attend the hearing. In a statement, Sinead Brooke Edwards' family urged the Georgian justice system to impose a life imprisonment sentence on Rafael Markolov, citing the tragic and devastating loss of their loved one, who left behind many grieving friends and family members. On March 9, 2022, a trial was held, at which Rafael Markolov was found guilty. Representing the family, Sinead's brother Tyson again requested that the defendant be given a life sentence. Markolov apologized to Tyson Edwards, claiming he was not that kind of person and had simply found himself in this situation. Ultimately, 33-year-old Rafael Markolov was sentenced to 20 years imprisonment, the maximum penalty allowed under Georgian law. Welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Shannon Mani. Shannon Mani was born on April 6, 1997, to Anshumani and Vijay Mani. When she was a small child, her parents immigrated to the United States from Fiji. The family settled in Waukesha, a small town in southeastern Wisconsin, where Shannon grew up and attended school. She was intelligent, attractive, and very outgoing. Her parents believed Waukesha was the perfect place to raise their children. After completing high school in 2015, Shannon enrolled at the University of Wisconsin at Milwaukee. She was passionate about helping others and aspired to become a social worker. Despite her busy schedule, Shannon worked with her father at an organic food company. It was at work that she met Quentin Neal, 26, who was applying for a similar position. Quentin had a strong desire to make a positive impact on people's lives. Shannon shared a similar passion, dreaming of building a shelter for women and children, while Quentin wanted to create a safe haven for his community. With their similar interests and outlook on life, Shannon and Quentin quickly formed a close bond. As their friendship blossomed into romance, Shannon was overjoyed to have met Quentin, and soon they started living together. Quentin showed genuine care for Shannon, and she ensured their relationship remained happy. They began making plans for their future together. However, Their lives took a drastic turn when Shannon vanished without a trace. On April 13, 2018, Shannon failed to pick up her younger brother from school and didn't show up to work. Her phone was switched off, and she hadn't informed anyone about her absence from work. Concerned, her parents went to the police station, unable to locate their daughter. Initially, detectives suspected that Shannon, being young, might have run away or gone off with friends. But her parents disagreed, knowing their daughter well. She wasn't the type to simply switch off her phone and abandon her family, leaving them worried and searching for her. Shannon's mother shared crucial details with investigators, prompting them to take the case more seriously. Shannon was 4 months pregnant when she vanished, which raised concerns since pregnant women rarely disappear without something bad happening to them. Furthermore, some of her belongings, including money and important documents, were still in her room, which was another alarming indication. Shannon's parents told investigators that the father of her child was 27-year-old Quentin Neal. However, when Quentin was contacted by phone, he claimed to have no knowledge of Shannon's whereabouts. According to Quentin, Shannon had been living with her parents, and he hadn't seen her at all that day. The investigators called Quentin again, asking him to come to the police station to answer some questions. Quentin appeared anxious, promising to arrive at the station immediately. When Shannon's parents were still present, Quentin told the investigators that the last time he had seen her was over 24 hours ago, when she left his house to pick up her little brother from school. They had only exchanged a few text messages since then, and had not been in contact again. The investigators asked Quentin if he had any idea where Shannon might be, but he was unable to provide one. According to Quentin, Shannon's life revolved around school and work, and she had always been in touch with her loved ones until that day. However, Quentin recalled that there was another guy who had shown interest in Shannon. Despite knowing she was in a relationship and pregnant, this guy had relentlessly pursued Shannon's affection, even after she asked him to leave her alone. The investigators instantly considered this guy a person of possible concern, as jealousy often leads to reckless behavior. The next day, police began questioning Shannon's friends to gather new information. They distributed details of the search for the young pregnant woman to all police stations in Wisconsin the same day. The first disturbing discovery was made. Shannon's car was found in Milwaukee, about 20 minutes from her home. Forensic experts carefully examined the vehicle inside and out, but found no suspicious signs. There was no evidence of carjacking, struggle, or any other crime. However, Shannon's purse and cell phone were missing from the car. 3 sets of fingerprints were found on the vehicle, including Shannon's and Quentin's. The origin of the third set remained unknown, and the police had to identify the person who left them. That same afternoon, the man mentioned by Quentin was questioned by investigators. Although he claimed to be upset about Shannon's disappearance, he denied Quentin's allegations, stating that he and Shannon were just friends and that he had never pursued a romantic relationship with her. When pressed further, he admitted to confessing his love to Shannon in the past, but she had rejected him, saying they could only be friends. Since then, he had not attempted to win her affection. The guy's fingerprints were found to match those in Shannon's car. However, he explained that he often got rides from Shannon to university, which is why his prints were in her car. He also claimed to have been 100 miles away from Waukesha, attending a baseball game when Shannon went missing. The investigators checked and confirmed his alibi, ruling him out as a suspect. The case got a surprising and crucial break when Shannon's mother, Anshumani, found her daughter's Apple Watch and checked her recent text messages. She took the watch to the police station, handing it over to investigators. Reviewing Shannon's texts, they made a significant discovery. Despite Quentin's claim that he hadn't met Shannon on the day she vanished, the texts showed they had arranged to meet up that day. This meant Quentin had lied to the investigators and Shannon's parents, making him the prime suspect. While examining Shannon's watch messages, investigators uncovered cracks in her relationship with Quentin. They found texts revealing Quentin's abusive behavior towards the pregnant mother. This revelation shocked Shannon, who had been unaware of her lover's true nature. Quentin apologized profusely, begging her not to leave him. Shannon proposed they take a break from each other. The investigators' suspicions grew, fueled by Quentin's troubled past. He had a criminal record, having recently been released from prison after serving time for robbery. He had multiple arrests for assault and other misdemeanors. Shannon's parents had also grown wary of Quentin, noticing their daughter's persistent depression. Moreover, Quentin exhibited emotional instability regarding the unborn baby, further solidifying the investigators' doubts about his character. After Shannon informed her parents about her pregnancy, they arranged a meeting with Quentin, during which he assured them that he would take care of both Shannon and the baby, claiming he had always wanted to have children. However, a few days later, according to Anshimani, Quentin sent Shannon some disturbing texts, contradicting his earlier promise and stating that he didn't want the baby. He even suggested that Shannon should consider having an abortion. The police attempted to track Shannon's cell phone and discovered it was last active in the afternoon of April 13th, near Quentin's residence. Shannon's mother noticed severe bruising on her arms and inquired about the cause. Shannon broke down in tears and revealed that Quentin had physically assaulted her, punching her with his fists while she was in her vehicle. Despite her parents' warnings to end the relationship, Shannon eventually forgave Quentin and resumed dating him. With this concerning information, investigators grew increasingly worried that they might not find Shannon alive, prompting them to obtain a search warrant and rush to Quentin's house. At first, the crime scene did not appear to show any signs of a struggle or disturbance. The area was clean, with no broken furniture or objects. Forensic experts sprayed the first floor with luminol, a chemical that detects blood, but found no evidence. However, when they applied the same test to the basement, the walls and floor glowed, indicating the presence of blood. The numerous marks found at the scene strongly suggested that Shannon was likely no longer alive. Quentin Neal was arrested and taken into custody. Before questioning him, investigators reviewed the contents of his phone and discovered that he had recently searched online for ways to remove evidence of a crime using a lye chemical. This suggested that he was planning to hide traces of his crime. During the interrogation, Quentin initially denied any knowledge of Shannon's whereabouts and claimed to have no connection to her disappearance. However, faced with solid evidence, he began to alter his story. Eventually, he agreed to confess to everything. Quentin claimed to have acted in self-defense when he took Shannon's life. He told investigators that Shannon had visited his house to discuss their future and their child. But the conversation escalated into an argument. According to Quentin, Shannon then entered the kitchen, grabbed a knife and a gun that were being kept for emergencies, and began threatening him. Quentin said he felt compelled to act quickly to protect himself, leading to a physical struggle that ended in Shannon's death. Quentin reiterated to the investigators that he had acted in self-defense, but they were skeptical due to the lack of defensive wounds on his body. Despite their doubts, they continued to listen to his account. Quentin said that, realizing the gravity of his actions, he panicked in the basement where the incident occurred. In an attempt to conceal the evidence, he used a large suitcase to hide the body. Quentin Neal led the police to a storage unit 6 miles from his home, where he had stashed a suitcase containing Shannon's body. When detectives opened the suitcase, they found Shannon's lifeless body, her wrists and ankles bound with duct tape, contradicting Quentin's claim of self-defense. Forensic examination revealed Shannon died from 2 gunshot wounds to the head and had additional knife wounds on her body. Shannon's parents were devastated when detectives informed them of the discovery of their daughter's body on April 18, 2018. Quentin Neal was subsequently indicted for the murders of Shannon Manny and her unborn child. The evidence gathered, including their correspondence from the day of her death, was sufficient for the court to reach a guilty verdict. The dispute had begun when Shannon visited Quentin's home to discuss her pregnancy, but she never left his house alive. The trial of Quentin Neal, accused of killing Shannon, was set to begin in the spring of 2019. However, just days before the trial, anonymous letters were sent to attorneys and court officials, claiming that someone else was responsible for Shannon's death. The letters were later deemed irrelevant after the author, a friend of Quentin's, was identified and found to be trying to confuse the investigation and help Quentin. Quentin faced the death penalty, but denied the charges and claimed he acted in self-defense. 15 months had passed since Shannon's death, and her family waited anxiously for justice, trying to stay positive. Shannon's mother, Anne Shimani, worked hard to keep her daughter's memory alive and not lose hope. Shannon had been passionate about supporting women and children affected by domestic violence, and her family had planned to build a shelter in her honor. However, that dream was never realized, as Shannon herself became a victim of violence. On July 15, 2019, Quentin Neal reached a plea deal with investigators, admitting guilt in the deaths of Shannon and her child. As part of the deal, prosecutors dropped the death penalty. 2 days later, on July 17, 2019, the Milwaukee County Circuit Court sentenced the 28-year-old to 2 concurrent life sentences without parole eligibility, ensuring he will spend the rest of his life in prison. At his sentencing, Neal remained silent, failing to explain his motive for the crime. Shannon's mother, Anne Shimani, expressed relief that justice had been served, noting that the only silver lining was that Neal would no longer harm anyone else. The family plans to keep Shannon's memory alive by opening a shelter in her honor.